Wonderful. Thank you so much, Quinn. All right, good morning, everyone. This is the Planning, Housing, Economic Development Committee. It's it's May 2nd, and we're taking up several items today, starting with the budget recommendation for the Park and Planning Commission. So, Pam, to you, and welcome back to an old friend, Jeff. Well, not too old, but our friendship is old. Jeff Zients.
Long-standing friend.
Right, long-standing friend. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. Yes, today we're doing the operating budget for Mncppc, which means we will cover the Park Fund, the Administration Fund, and then following that, there are amendments to the FY23 through 28 Capital Improvements Program that the committee and the council have already reviewed, but these are amendments related to state aid. So once we get through everything related to operating budget, we'll cover the state aid amendments. So if you have your staff report for the operating budget, you'll see on the front page there is a summary. It gives you an overview of the FY22 approved budget for Mncppc, both that administrative fund, which covers their central administrative services portion for Montgomery County, and the planning department, and then the park fund. And you'll see the FY23 county executive recommended amount, and those are relatively close this year, but still the CE's budget is less than the request. And just as a note, you know that as you're used to this process, once we have the committee's recommendation and we go through the council, when the council approves it, then there will be a bi-county meeting with Prince George's County to approve the Mncppc budget. And that right now is scheduled for May 12th.
All right.
So on page 3, you'll have an overview of the budget. The tax-supported funds, which we've already mentioned this morning, are the Administration Fund and the Park Fund, and they represent the lion's share of the operating budget for the Commission, for Montgomery County's portion. The Commission total FY23 request is $182.9 million, and this number does include enterprise operations, property management, debt service, and special revenue funds. An appropriation amount required to cover the total operating budget is $196.2 million.
The difference being those other sources of funding.
Correct. The FY23 proposed tax-supported budget, including debt service, is $162.7 million, and this represents a $12.4 million increase over the adopted budget in 22, or an 8.3% increase. And then you can see for the Administration Fund, the executive's budget is just a little over $1 million below the Commission's request, and for the Park Fund, the CE's recommended budget is about $1.2 million below the Commission's request.
Okay.
On page 4 is a summary showing again the Administration Fund, the components that make up the Administration Fund, the Park Fund, and as always there are grants, supporting funds, the land acquisition, advanced land acquisition fund, and internal service funds, special revenue funds. All of these are things you will see today. There aren't necessarily concerns with anything or things the committee may feel they have to discuss in detail about these, but again, they're all part of the budget, so each piece of this will be before you.
Okay.
Moving on, there are spending affordability guidelines related to their budget, and typically these items come before the council early on in the budgeting process. There's a discussion about what that spending affordability guideline appropriation or amount will be. There's a targeted amount, and you can see that this year they are slightly above the SAG limit, but it does not impact the ability to approve the budget as it moves forward. And those totals are there on the middle of page 5. You'll see the breakdown by Administration Fund, Park Fund, debt service, and OPEB, what was adopted in FY22, what the FY23 request is, and what the CE recommended is on those totals. And then we have compensation, and just to note that the compensation marker this year represents the largest personnel portion increase in the FY23 budget as submitted. The increase is $3.9 million, and parts of that will be reviewed as we go through different pieces of the budget today. In addition to the compensation marker, there are other personnel costs. They include OPEB pay-as-you-go and pre-funding. There's a slight decrease in pension costs, a slight decrease in health insurance costs, and an increase in a reclassification marker, and then just a slight decrease for minimum wage. So the total compensation change for the Mncppc proposed budget is $5.4 million increase. And then finally, at the top of page 6, these are just the high-level reviews. Again, we'll get into more detailed reviews of both the Park Fund and Administration Fund. But at the overarching view, in addition to those compensation changes, there are non-compensation costs that are predicted to increase, estimated to increase. They are debt service of almost $900,000, an increase in the park's National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, about a little over $200,000, assorted operating budget impacts for capital projects at $100,000, new initiatives under the subtitle of Investment in Critical Needs. These are $2.5 million. Operating budget major known commitments of $3.7 million, and some one-time reductions of over $400,000. So the total non-compensation change compared to the FY22 budget is $6.8 million, or 4.5% increase. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Zients, who's going to cover the Park Fund.
Thank you. First, full disclosure, I am a park and planning retiree. I am receiving annuities every month, a pension every month from them, so there is some self-interest here, but be that it is, I'm as critical as I can be.
Not sure what the self-interest is exactly, but
Well,
I'm glad you disclosed your relationship.
They pay me, so as a continuing entity, I have an interest in them continuing. Yeah. Although
Retirement fund pays you. That's its own
You know.
governed institute.
I had to say that somewhere.
He's a lawyer.
And the other thing is, I used to manage park employees, so I had a piece of their budget for a while as well. So I used to write this stuff, which gives me some
Enough to be dangerous.
insight. Yeah, enough to be dangerous. I tried to be as boring as I could and went line by line through the packet from 2 years ago to see exactly what changed and what didn't, and how to approach their budget.
Did you read the footnotes?
I would have read the footnotes if there were. Sometimes I would have liked footnotes, but that's okay. The first thing is right away is if you compare budgets, there's a reduction in the number of parks. I've never seen that before, but yep, there was, because they moved. Both the planning department and the parks
These are the
department.
ones Casey couldn't get to, so he doesn't want them to be, He didn't want those to
Well, you put down a number, you compare it to the next, and you say, okay, what happened here? The somewhat interesting thing there is that there were really two parks at the old MRO on Spring Street. One was the building itself, and one was the park next to it. The park, I think, was built out of right-of-way when Royce Hanson retired, and they named it after him, something like that. But it was.
Little community garden sort of thing right outside of MRO that was called Royce Hanson Park.
Well, no, it was developed as a park and funded without a CIP project because they slipped the money in that way. But that's some old school stuff. But in any event, when you see a park, there might be more than one, is the only outline. And I couldn't go on the map to see if that occurred to other places, to see how much in that 400 number, there were other instances of that. But I thought that was somewhat interesting right away in the first line of the budget. In total, though, you're dealing with a budget request of $118 million, which is $8.6 million above last year's request. That's a 7.5% increase above the executive's 6.5 recommended increase. Of course, that's 6.5 recommended across the entire MNCPC budget. The Parks Department is being recommended for a slightly increased hit on that reduction by their own recommendation. So instead of $1.1 million reduced from the proposed, the department is recommending that it be reduced by 1.7 in order to meet the executive recommendation.
Sorry, Jeff, one second, Jeff. You might need to lean closer to the mic.
Oh, that's construction? Oh.
spot in our building, the janitorial staff sometimes set up clean restrooms at one thirty in the
Want to swap? Trade? Want to trade? Okay.
This is related to construction, so they are, I think, making some kind of air ventilation in the hallway and the staircase there.
I'll do my best to lean forward.
Yes, lean in.
Now, the tables are a little bit confused because sometimes they include the park police and sometimes they don't. When you deal with total increases, I think this one's including park police, it's $9.1 million. And not surprisingly, for a budget that's made up of 80% personnel expenses, 50% of the increase they're suggesting is really from compensation increases to existing personnel. So not surprising at all. There are known commitments of $1.4 million. That's 15% of the total. Certainly they have they're dealing with inflation like everyone else, and the consumer price index has gone up, and some of their contracts go up, so they know that they're getting some increases. The program enhancements is $1.2 million. It's also, I believe it's 7 employees or something, for things that they think are good things to do and they want to do. Program enhancements are about 13% of their increases. One of the things that I would never recommend cutting are the operating budget impacts of new parks. If you put on new parks, you can expect the labor requirements of those reports. That's 9% of their increases. There are NPDS mandates. That's only 2% of what they're doing. So those are in general how their increases. On the next page of the memo goes through really the personnel increases that they're expecting. It's or want. It's 15 people in total, including 4 park police, and of those, only 1 is associated with operating budget impacts of parks. Now that was a little bit confused in their budget. They had some references to the NPDS program within OBI as well, but within the chart that they provided for personnel, they say it's only 1 person. So you have those additional employees. One of the more interesting things I came up against is lapse salary. As compared to last year's budget and budgets before that, the department submitted the same line. They said, we know we had a 7.5% assumed lapse. It's a burden to us, but we understand that's what it is. And last year they said, in response to a question, what's your experience with lapse been? They said, go look up the quarterly reports that we submit to council. Well, this time I looked up the quarterly reports that they submitted to council for the last 2 years, and there's 0 evidence that 7.5% lapse has been a real constraint to their actual hiring. There's 2 columns on those reports. One is number of positions hired and not. One is frozen positions. In those reports, they have never, in the Parks Department, they have in planning, they've never recognized any position as being frozen. Within those 2-year periods, they've never had more than 9.5. They've never had a lapse less than 9.5. So in all cases, they've been well above the 7.5. Now, in their response to saying, what evidence do you have that this has been a constraint? They said something in their response that said, well, we have had unofficial frozen positions. Well, I'm from New Jersey. I don't know what that means. Either you're frozen or you're not frozen, but you're not unofficially frozen. But in any event, I would expect that frozen positions be reported to the council in those quarterly reports, so you can see exactly what those reports are intended to do, which are to let you know if lapse is constraining or not. But in any event, lapse is really a reduction in the salary line for their budget. The existence of lapse lets them, the existence of money in that budget allows them some flexibility to do seasonal work if employees or contracts if they can't find permanent employees to do it. It gives them flexibility to accomplish their budget. That is for sure. But when you're dealing straight with lapse, 7.5 has not been a constraint to their actual numbers. And they say, yes, we're working on all sorts of efforts to increase that. There's always some known attrition of employees. People leave for service, they retire, they leave for other jobs, whatever. There's always time in rehiring. There's always some natural lapse. That goes without saying. But the department's actual experience on lapse is well above 7.5%. Therefore, if you need to find money, you might increase the assumed lapse. But I'm not being asked to make recommendations on how you meet the executive's budget. But that.
And if you increase the assumed lapse, so you're saying the lowest percent of actual lapse is 9.7%. Often it's been higher than that.
Yeah.
The amount of assumed lapse
Is 7.5.
7.5. The difference between assumed and actual is how much money? It's a couple
Need a
positions.
calculator and a
It's probably like what? I don't know how many positions. you have.
It's real money.
A couple $100,000. Probably, right? A couple $100,000.
There's over $100 million, I think, in salaries.
Well, we can dig out the number. Well, I just want to address this general idea. I mean, the implication seems to be that we should be upping the lapse based on the fact that we've had difficulty filling some positions over the last couple of years during the pandemic. I would suggest to you this is evidence that we have managed our spending conservatively, which is what you want us to do. And we shouldn't be in the position where, because we were conservative during the pandemic, because it looked for a while there like the world was going to end and we had no idea what was going to happen with the budget, that we wanted to be very careful, and hence, I don't know whether you want to call it unofficial freeze, but we were.
I don't think anyone's criticizing what you've done. I think what the argument here is that the assumption of a lower lapse rate than the actual implemented lapse rate is just an assumption that leaves funding unutilized.
But the point is that we are using this. We would like to hire all these people. We would like to get back to a lower lapse rate because we have huge gaps,
Sure.
particularly in the Parks Department. So I don't think it's necessarily a good idea.
Criticism of anything, particularly, it's an observation that if you don't hit, if your assumed lapse rate is lower than your actual lapse rate, then money sits in that account. I don't know if it can be allocated to any other expenditure.
Well, it is, yes.
It is.
And we
So
do.
It becomes a
What we do.
reserve, in a sense, to the commission for its operating funding, and
And I
the
think
staff
you
is
see that.
saying the county council gets to decide how funding is allocated.
Well, but
first and
but to the extent that we end the year with more money in the operating budget than because we haven't spent it, we are often using it, and you'll see it in the non-recommended reductions. We will prepay things that you guys support with end of year money. That's transparent. That's reported to you.
In other words, one of the things you came forward with was you were able to absorb the difference largely between your recommended budget from the executive and your requested budget.
Right.
And this is an example of how you would do that.
And that's
You
fully
have funding available through the
Yes,
non,
and that is
the
fully
difference in lapse
transparent.
assumptions.
It's under your control, and we're not doing something that's outside of the council's ability to see what we're up to or to tell us we should be doing stuff different, anything of the kind. In fact, I'd argue that that cushion has really saved our bacon collectively. And yeah, we would have liked to hire these. If we could have, we would have shaved it down to 7.5% or even lower. We would have liked to hire these people, but if we couldn't, it's not like we're taking this money and spending it on something you guys don't know anything about. We're using it to backfill projects and priorities that you have identified.
You know, I've watched a lot of TV in my retirement, and I've taken to watching Ted Lasso. And the one thing I'll remember from him is be curious, not judgmental. And I was curious about this statement since it was flat out the same as it was in prior years, even though it looked to me like experience would have been different this year. Now, again, in being curious and not judgmental, on page 41 of your budget, you have both the adopted numbers.
Which, is that in the packet?
If you can find that one out. Let's see.
All right,
Yes, that's it.
Keep talking.
Um,
Oh, you're referring to
What
the
they,
other budget. Okay.
in their budget. What they have is an adjusted adopted budget, and then they're supposed to have an estimated FY21 budget. Well, given the number of vacancies, I would have assumed that the personnel expenses for FY22 would be much lower than the budgeted amount because they had all of these vacancies and probably didn't spend all this money. But what they do for estimated 22 is just repeat what's in the budget. So there are no differences in this. So it's not transparent on how much they assume will be in end-of-year balance at this. So even though these lapses have occurred, I don't know what the end-of-year balance will be, and I assume that they might be able to take on more than what they've suggested, but I don't know. Because I'm curious, not judgmental.
All right, I've got Councilmember Duranto, Councilmember Freeze.
Well, I was just going to say, if this were in the packet, we could be prepared to answer these questions, but it's not. So that's the first issue. We are perfectly prepared to answer whatever questions council staff or council may have, but if we have time to prepare based on the materials that are prepared by council staff, that's helpful to us to be responsive to these questions. Secondly, I'm not really sure where any of this is going. It's inherently, it's almost impossible to predict a year ahead of time what your lapse is going to be. You try to do your best. We're not trying to pad it. We're just trying
We
to.
haven't heard a recommendation from staff. We're hearing as an observation, and I think the observation is you guys have some budget flexibility. That's kind of fundamentally.
And we'd like to keep it. That's what I'm
And
getting at.
naturally, you would say you'd like to keep it, and you're going to say you use it for all the things we want you to do. So, I think it's an interesting question for us to contemplate here is whether we are comfortable with that. And, but I haven't heard a recommendation for a different lapse assumption at this point. We could make one, but then that has cascading effect throughout the budget that we would have to work on. And what's the point of that exactly? I'm not totally sure. But I think it's an interesting flag, and we can chew on whether there's an action that's needed.
Appreciate it. Well, what is in the packet is the salary lapse issue. You have the 3 paragraphs there that talk about that it's assumed 7.5, but that it was 9.7 according to your last vacancy report, and that the highest vacancy rate was over 18% back in 2021. So there is a macro policy issue. I personally think we should make the budget decision, and that while some modest flexibility is of course appropriate, that we should have the information, and you should be prepared to give us the information. I agree with that point 100%. That about what has happened, what are the trend lines? Why has this happened? Where is it going? What are you doing with it? Like we shouldn't have to guess that, and you should be prepared to answer that. And then we can make a policy decision about whether it's the right thing to allow that type of flexibility and how you've been using it. I will say that, but we need to have that information, and then we also need to know if we did move it to 10%, what does that mean? What would that mean, and financially? Do you all know? Do you have the sense of that?
It's about, every 1% is $930,000.
Right. So, okay. So you're talking about, that's a 2 million something, $2.5 million plus dollars, which is not insignificant.
No, I'm sorry, no, it's 93,000.
Okay. So it's 300. So it's 300, that somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000, which still isn't insignificant. We have discussions for 30 minutes about programs that cost $300,000. So I see you're trying to say something. So go ahead. Yeah.
I'm just going to observe that we've been living through a pandemic, so we've had extraordinary uncertainty and ups and downs with respect to personnel, right? We've lost people, we've taken people on, we didn't know what was going to happen to the budget. So I would say the variance from what was budgeted to what we actually did was actually pretty small in light of the cataclysmic events which nobody could have seen coming. To the point of what's the harm in changing the assumed lapse to something closer to what we've experienced the past couple of years. The harm is that we're understaffed. It's not good to be at 9.9+% lapse because it means somebody's not out mowing the grass. That's the problem.
That was going to be my second second question. What is your plan to reduce the lapse to what it's actually budgeted or accounted for? And then, is it how soon can you get to the actual 7.5? Because what we don't want is out of whack assumptions given the pandemic. And then I guess before you answer that, what was it pre-pandemic? How and I don't know if I missed that from you, Jeff. Remind me.
December of 21, before the pandemic, it was 9.7.
It was still high.
It was their lowest.
What is it now?
Than it was. Right now, it's about 20%.
Right. Well, so you're not going to be 20%. You're going to do better than that. But okay, so
you hope.
Well, you hope. It's because of the market and in public service. We're talking about this with compensation generally. Public service is hard to recruit to. So pre-pandemic, it was still a little high. So if you could just, when you're answering the question, what's your plan to get down to a reasonable number, down from 20? And then what were you doing before that it was still a little high prior to the pandemic?
I'll let Mike address this question in general, but before he does, I just want to point out we are experimenting with some innovative things, including allowing people with past criminal histories to work for the Parks Department. So I don't expect we're going to solve the problem with that, but I'm just saying we are exploring every avenue to try to open up the hiring pool to get good people who can do the job and backfill some of these positions. We're also working with HR, and I'll let Mike talk a little bit about what else we're doing to expand the recruitment. I would just also observe, though, we've had a lot of backfilling through internal promotions. So as people have left, one of the things we've done is that creates an opportunity for people to move up in the organization. That takes time. And what we found is that as people leave and somebody else gets promoted, that opens up another position that we then go have to fill. In general, that's a really positive thing. It's not actually a problem over the long run, but it is one of the challenges that we have, not just in filling. We don't have a shortage of people that want to work for the Parks Department. It's not like people don't view it as a great place to work and a great opportunity. I think, compensation is pretty good and benefits are excellent. So we don't really have a problem so much recruiting people overall, but rapidly managing some of the things that have gone on, not just with the pandemic, but the sort of slow but steady exodus of baby boomers. There's lots of retirements going on. There's a lot of things moving parts here that have made it more difficult than it would ordinarily be, even aside from pandemic, just to manage this challenge. But I'll let Mike talk a little bit more about the kind of stuff.
Thank you. This is a very complex equation. As you know, I've been around a long time, and I recall parks a decade or so ago having a vacancy rate of down as low as 5%. So it fluctuates, and it fluctuates within the various types of employment we have. I recall at one point, Park Police was carrying a 20% vacancy rate, and that was the source of our lapse years ago. Under Chief McSwain, in this difficult environment, we've been very successful with our officers, and we have a relatively low rate in Park Police. Trades are, everyone knows who's trying to get a plumber, an electrician, or carpenter to do anything in the private or public sector. So we're working with the school system. We're creating apprenticeship programs. So I could go on and on about the unique and specific areas about how we're trying to target recruitment and hiring. I'm working with the executive director and the human resources manager and central services to bring on sign-on bonuses, retention bonuses. We're streamlining processes. But yeah, there's no question, the pandemic, this 20% and 18% numbers are very related to the pandemic. I certainly don't want to pin the number on the vaccine mandate, but the reality is, as pleased as I was that we had very few employees who chose not to get their shot, we did have to lose a bunch of employees in the Parks Department who refused to get their shot. So it's a perfect storm of different situations that is leading to these 18 and 20% numbers. But I would say, to answer your question, what if you bumped it up to 10%? I would say there would probably become a point in the next year or two where that would be causing us to actually freeze positions. When we're successful getting our workforce up, we'd get to a point where we'd say, well, we can't hire any more people because we're not budgeted to do so.
This year, I mean, obviously, it would just be a one-year decision, right? Because we'd look at it next year. But and $600,000, if I'm doing my math right, is not nothing. But I get
Well, it would be money that would have to be added back next year. It would become, if you take that money out of the budget, it comes out of the base this year, and it's got to be found next year.
Right.
It would be new money.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I guess you answered components of a plan. I mean, I think just maybe on paper, if you guys could, between now and full council, like say, here's our view on it. Here's what we are doing to address it. You've mentioned some things here. Any historical information you think is relevant, I just think that would be helpful for us to have. I'm not making a proposal right now, but I do just think the information we should have that information. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, please.
As the
Please.
executive director,
Yeah.
who handles all the corporate HR. We have looked at this across the commission. We went to, under the leadership of Chair Anderson, we went to the Department of Education, the State Department of Education. As you know, we have daycares, summer camps that are regulated by them. And initially, for a number of years, it was said that we would have to follow their very strict requirements for people who work with children. They just recently, we went to them and they said that, no, it's only for those who work in the camps or in the daycare centers. So we have drastically reduced those. I think there were like literally a dozen offenses that if somebody was charged with, that they could not work for us. So that has been drastically reduced to, I think, like murder 1, murder 2, child pornography, and like the most egregious sexual assault. So it's been, drug charges are off, any other kinds of stuff that nonviolent. So because of that, we've now aggressively put in place a program to hire returning citizens. We've met with Employ Prince George's. We've met with the Assistant Secretary for the State Department of Labor, Jim Rutkowski, and his team to coordinate us with some of the work programs and some of the maintenance programs that, labor that is inside the fence, and so that they can set up a pathway with us. We are meeting with the sister county organization in Montgomery County as well to talk about how we can begin that recruiting program. And in that program, they also are looking for new Americans to be recruited. There are a number of diasporas in this area of Ukrainian refugees as well as Afghanistani refugees. So we are looking to see about how we can engage them because they are here legally, and they can work in some of maybe our maintenance where maybe English speaking is not necessarily as much of a requirement. We are also, we've just brought on in a temporary manner and probably looking at doing it permanently, a Spanish-speaking recruiter to engage that workforce as well. We also have, just so that we're doing this long-term and it's not just a one-shot thing, we have a contract with Montgomery College to look at our sustainability and succession planning. And they're putting together a training program for our mid-level, junior-level management people so that we have a pipeline for these folks coming into the market. We have talked to Costa de Maryland. We spoke to the Director of Military and Federal Affairs at the State of Maryland to put us in touch with a lot of the military installations so we can access veterans and explain to them what our programs are about. I actually personally used to work for that department a number of years ago in the state, so I have a warm relationship with a lot of our veterans, so we're setting up that program. And I'm also looking, one thing I had worked with in the past are veterans who had post-traumatic stress coming back into the workforce. And it just seems to me that there's some of that need for a navigator, too, for returning citizens. So we are talking to employ Prince George's and Montgomery about what we can do to maybe even set up some sort of a pilot program like that that will help make these returning citizens a lot more successful in navigating the system after being out of it for a number of years. So we have all these very robust programs that we're working on, and we would be happy to put that in writing for you.
Great, appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thanks for that. I was going to ask something similar about the programs and practices that you have undertaken and recently changed in order to try to recruit more people. And I think all of us are very supportive of all the efforts that you described, some of which I think we've learned here for the first time, which is exciting, and some of which is a repeat of what we have learned previously, including the efforts for what we colloquially refer to at least as banning the box, which we're very supportive of. This council has been on record supporting broadly, and I think all of us are excited about that. And have legislative track record, and Councilmember Jawanda has been a leader on that issue in particular. I appreciate this. First of all, appreciate Mr. Zients bringing this forward. This is what the budget process is about, so I think that having this conversation is positive and is good. I do think it would be helpful for us to have, on a regular basis, maybe a quarterly or a semi-annual vacancy report from the agency that is shared with the council, and then we can decide whether we discuss it as a PHED committee. I mean, previously we've received written reports, like we received lots of written reports, but if we make this a regular part of the PHED committee conversation, I think would be helpful, so we can get progress updates as needed.
They submit reports quarterly, and I've been doing so. My comment was that when I got the information back, it had this new category of frozen position as unofficial frozen position, whereas frozen position is a category within their reporting, and I would have expected unofficial frozen position to be within frozen position.
Yeah, so I think it would be helpful. First of all, I think I understand, and what I was trying to say is the quarterly written reports coming back here and actually having a conversation about it if needed, if there's warranted for conversation, I think would be helpful outside of the budget process, so we can get a real-time update on how all of the various things that are happening are actually working in real time. And I do think it would be helpful to follow up to find out the unofficial frozen position. If we could get that formally included in the report in some form or fashion, I think it would be helpful for all of us. I am personally more interested in us figuring out how to lower the vacancies than raise the lapse. We talk about this conversation in every single department across county government. Vacancies are way higher than any of us would want. And that has been exacerbated by the pandemic, but it was not, like most issues, created by the pandemic. We have more positions than we have people filling those positions for a variety of reasons. It's too hard to go through the process of getting hired. We have to look at the competitiveness of compensation. We have to look at, whether or not we're recruiting in the right places, whether or not we put up roadblocks, as you just discussed, to recruit some of the very people who we would want in these public positions serving the community. So, I think we ought to be looking about this broadly as well. I do think that budget flexibility is important, But I do think also that, the council does have budget authority, and so, figuring out that balance is important. I know we're going to talk through specifically with this context of what we do with this budget, right? There are requests here, and I think we can talk about that. But I think in terms of raising the lapse numbers at this point in time, I wouldn't be comfortable moving that forward. But I think it's something that we ought to monitor and take a look at, and make decisions as we move forward to determine whether or not the numbers that we have are appropriate, not just with the commission, but across county government, because I think this is a broad-based issue.
Okay, so 20% lap, that's your current lapse. That's your current, is that vacant positions, 20%?
I'm not entirely sure whether that's present as of today or not, but we are.
That was mid-March.
Is that in the ballpark?
Yes.
So, I mean, that is a lot of money, right? The difference between 20% and 10%, that sounds like it's $10 million. Am I wrong about that?
$1 million. About $1 million.
About $100,000 per percent.
$100,000 per percent. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, we want you to staff up. We'll keep this in mind here as we proceed through these budget items. I want to commend you for the vaccination requirement. I thought that was a very strong policy. I thought you showed a lot of leadership at the commission, and I appreciate it. And I think it was the right thing to do, and I think it will be ever more the right thing to do in the future. I think it's sad that the county hasn't been able to institute a requirement like that. I think we suffered when Omicron hit, and we had massive employee, outages. We had to reduce service in our fire stations and so forth. So that's what not having a vaccination requirement will do to you. I think it's worse in terms of its impact on service than, losing the very few, small percentage of employees, 1 or 2%, that refuse to get vaccinated. So, okay. Let's continue here.
Continuing on, there are fee increases embedded in this budget. I'd like to talk more about that with the enterprise fund than the fees in general. Some of them go up 20%, but it's difficult to give a percentage for any individual fee because it varies across the board, and whether it's for individual or groups or that. I didn't add up all of the number of fees they increased, but it might be 100 or so. It's really a lot of individual fees, but there are fee increases embedded in this budget. The budget is organized by division. So if you wanted to know how much money is the commission spending on ball fields, you'd be hard-pressed to find it in the budget. For 10, 15, 20 years, been talking about a programmatic budget that remained in last year's memo on the budget for reasons I don't know, but that's not what is going on. I don't know if the council is still requesting that, but the organization of this budget is by department. So you know how much Parks South is doing, how much Parks North is doing, how much horticulture is doing, but not by program. So, that's okay. It's just, that's the way it is.
What's involved? How hard is that to change?
Oh, really hard.
It's mainly a question of, do our enterprise software systems support the kind of reporting that we required? And I'll just tell you, I'll be completely open with you. Our ERP implementation has been a total disaster. Okay, I'm just going to come clean on that. It has been, many enterprise software implementations are screwed up, and this one is screwed up. I'm just going to put that out there. We're not trying to hide that. I just want to be completely open. It's been over a decade, and really, if I have one regret of something I haven't done since I've been here, it was shutting that project down and just throwing it in the trash can and starting over. I wish that the first time we heard this, before I was the chair, we were told about problems with implementation, cost overruns. We were briefed on this and told, you know what, you're too far into it to turn back, just plow through it, it's going to get better. And I wish I could say that that was the right decision. It was the wrong decision. We should have started over. And I'm going to press very hard to, as part of our implementation of the next module, we're going to be faced with another decision about whether we should keep going with this vendor and go for another one. And I have a strong bias in favor of switching vendors because this one has been really bad. So I'm just going to, we want to talk about transparency, there it is. It has not been good. And it's not that, the only thing I can say on our defense is we're not the only ones this has happened to. I know that this has happened many other organizations, including county government, where you try to implement one of these, and it's the same old story. You get overpromised and underdelivered by the vendor. You get the vendor switches teams. The group that pitched you, within 6 months, they're all gone, and they have the B team in place. There's a whole bunch of problems with these things that are not unique to our organization. But I'm just going to say, if you want to do a program-based budget, you have to have extremely sophisticated enterprise software, and it has to work really well, and your people all have to be used to using it. It's an extraordinarily complex and difficult thing, even if everything goes smoothly, which it almost never does. So there it is. We would love to be able to report on a program-by-program basis. One of the reasons you can't do it with the less sophisticated software is because you get really misleading information. Like if you were to say, how much does it cost to police Woodside Urban Park? Well, you could assume it's like 0.05 FTE of a park police officer's time. If you shut down Woodside Urban Park, would you be able to lose one police officer position? Obviously not. So some of this is about figuring out how to count for all the shared and common costs across the park system and what that would mean if you were to cut back. Like if you said, let's shut down all the tennis courts, what would that do to our operating and maintenance situation? The answer is that's a question that's almost impossible to answer in a meaningful way, because if you shut down all the tennis courts without shutting down the parks, you're still going to have almost all the costs that are associated with having the tennis courts there. So we're enthusiastic about being able to report more program-based information, but that's going to take a while, and it's going to require this ERP situation to be worked out, which I hope will be done. Well, you know, I'm taking you up on it, right? The idea that we are not, I'm sorry if I seem a little prickly when there's a suggestion that we're not transparent. I strongly feel that we have been absolutely gone overboard to be transparent in every aspect of our dealings with you and with the public. So I do get a little kind of my backup when these kind of insinuations are made. So I just want to be crystal clear to you and show you we are totally open with you and are absolutely willing and open to discussing any concerns that you may have, including program-based budgeting.
I used to say when I worked at Park and Planning that my time card was the only fiction I was paid to write. And that was because you had to submit your time card 3 days before the time period was due in order for Bi-County to have enough time to process a paycheck. Think of a time card if I
I'm
had
not
to...
helping the situation here, Jeff. Okay.
Sorry, if you had to put down how much time did I work on this park versus this park versus this park versus this park in a day, a time card would take you for forever. So it would be enormous.
That's been fixed, Jeff.
Okay. It's been a long time.
We have made some progress, even on ERP. I don't mean to suggest that it's like where we are where we were a decade ago or back in the Jeff Science days. I'm not saying you're old, but it has been a few years. But it's a struggle. It's very hard.
Great. Yeah. All right. Let's keep.
Next thing you have is
I'm just going to be one statement. Just the ERP, we don't have to talk about it anymore, but just let us know when that time period of when do you make that decision and how much does it cost and where is it in the budget? And I just think if it's a disaster, I agree, we shouldn't have disasters. So
Well, it's in the CAS budget, and it's in the CWIT budget. So
Okay.
go right ahead. We're happy to have that conversation.
good. Okay. All right.
next thing in the packet on page 10 are non-recommended.
I think in anticipation of what you said was a issuance of the contract or something like that, it sounds like we ought to have some, a number of hands on deck to help make sure that it succeeds this time, so.
Could I just add, Councilmember Reamer, just a little bit on that? We actually have a study that is going on right now by a consultant, external consultant, to take a look specifically at government systems to see what works best. It's the GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, so they are folks who are extremely, extremely adept at these systems and use them every day. So we're expecting that report to come out this summer. We also, in our budget, under the Department of Human Resource and Management, we asked for a position that would be kind of a translator between the ERP system and our HRIS system, so that you have somebody who understands our HR programs and can translate that, also has some computer skills and can translate that into an ERP system. So that is one of our requests, because we wanted to make sure we had the right staff in place internally to be able to also externally manage some of the things coming up based on our past experience with ERP.
And that independent consultant was at my insistence, because I swore we were not going to make the same mistake twice. So I was adamant that we would not make a decision about a new ERP implementation until we had an outside consultant who was unconnected to any of the previous vendors, or for that matter, internally to our staff to assess what the best course was.
Good call.
Yeah, I'll just quickly say, I mean, we all get caught up in the sunk cost fallacy, and I think this is a good example of that. And at what point does it make sense to reverse course, and how much is the cost of, changing course? And that's an important conversation to have at the commission. It's an important conversation for us to be abreast of. I worked a little bit at the state level on these challenging, complex technology contracts and enterprise systems, and I will tell you, it's not unique, and you get caught up into the comfort level of folks adapting to new technology and also the implementation of that technology, and it is one of the biggest challenges that we face because the organizations are so big, and so reversing course on that is tough, and so it's a challenge. But I just hope we don't get caught in the sunk cost fallacy where we think that money that's already been spent somehow has an impact on the decision that we make today and the additional money that we're going to have to spend regardless, one way or another, to get to the outcome that we need. So I'll just note that. Thanks.
Look at this building.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can skip over the reductions for a second, because there's only one of the funds I'd like to talk about for 2 seconds or less, and that's the enterprise fund. The enterprise fund is doing great. It's a well-run organization that does what it is. It's self-sustaining and provides a lot of money for good things. Fees were raised this year to the extent that this year it's estimated $1.8 million above expenses will be taken in. About 1.9 million next year is proposed taken in. The fees were increased in what the approved fees. It was approved for increases in January. Some of those fees are just taking effect. But certainly, if the obligation was to keep in line with costs, it's certainly the fees exceeded that. When the fees were increases, it was cited, the $15 minimum wage was cited, and the ongoing cost expenses for staff was cited. But what that fund also, what the obligation is for there be in the fund for enterprise to be at least 10% above operating costs, and they far exceed that. And part of the reason for that is the department is using the cash in that fund to fund desired facilities. So instead of using revenue bonds to fund it, they're paying cash for it, for a number of things. Now, at some point, they might need revenue bonds too, but there's like $7.9 million in the fund, which is reported in the annual financial report but wasn't reported in the budget, that can be used either to support shortfalls in revenue or future capital. But I suggest that the rise in fees is a choice between paying things in cash or future bond financing. Just a heads up, it's not a recommendation either way, you just should be aware of it. So they're accumulating a surplus that could be used in the future for capital.
Okay, good to know.
All right, that's the only thing I wanted to do about the other funds, but on page 6, you have, nope, I'm sorry, page 10 is recommended reductions to meet the executive's mark, which is a reduction for the department of 1.7 million. So I would turn it over to the department to explain these or however the committee would like to go through this.
Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, I assume we're going to go through the recommended reductions and then talk about the non-recommended
Yes.
reductions. And
They're all non-recommended. I mean, the Parks Department proposed the budget that included these.
Right, so- we have a requested restoration. They're all one-time expenses. There's the athletic fields, nutrient management, the infrastructure, and the hard surface trails.
Yeah, those
Total
are
of
the
250
non-recommended reductions.
Total of 250,000. I would suggest that we add the tier 1, 250,000 onto the rec list.
Great. I certainly agree with that, but I wanted to just ask some more questions about the nutrient management. So what I see here that you're suggesting that based on this level of funding, you could only do half the fields a year. Can you talk a little bit about that, Dr. Riley?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. This is a phase-in of, meeting best practices for the turf on our 314 athletic fields in the park system. So nutrient management basically is all the things you do to turf. You fertilize it, you aerate it, you top dress it, you overseed it periodically in the spring and fall to keep it healthy, to basically improve the soil structure so the grass as a plant just stays healthier throughout the year and can sustain droughts better and sustain foot traffics better. So it's just all about making sure that there's grass where grass is supposed to be on diamond fields and rectangle fields. And it is a phase-in. This is about a quarter of what the total program costs, because it says we will be able to put about half the fields into the program and only meet half of our maintenance standards, which is 2 out of a recommended 4 applications per year. So we just, we have so many, as discussed earlier, we have so many competing needs where there's holes in the park system for us meeting our maintenance standards. This was a phased-in practice, but it certainly could benefit from full funding, which would be $400,000 instead of $100,000, and we'd be able to implement the program.
Okay.
This is a cut of 100,000. So if you had 400,000 in, you still have 300,000.
I may have said that wrong, but if we instead of getting 100,000 restored, we got $400,000 restored, we would
You would be able
be
to
able
do
to
all the
implement the
fields.
program.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, because I think there's a little bit of a discrepancy in the conversation. So the county executive's recommended budget funds this line item at 0 or at 300,000. The total, if the total amount of full funding is 400,000, what is the county, with the county executive's recommended budget, what would that line item be funded at?
Well, I can't respond to the line item, but if you look at page 10, just to recap, starting from the bottom up, the gap between what we asked for and what the county executive recommended once we balance out for the other funds is $1.7 million. Okay, so, and we are covering the majority of that. Those items on the bottom, and I do want to point out, we talked earlier about using the personnel savings from last year to prepay items this year. That's that $685,000 and the $29,000 we're prepaying. So basically, all that's left is a gap of $250,000 between what the executive funded and what we asked for. And we came up with these three items, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 are at the discretion of the Parks Department to specify. You won't find them named in the executive.
Right, I was just noting, I'm sorry, I think we're kind of getting twisted around here. You mentioned full funding of this would be $400,000, which would get you to the level of service that you were just describing for this. These are three items, by the way, that have been big priorities of the council and of the Parks Department, which I appreciate, and that we've tried to fund before, and we've added funding for in previous years. So at $100,000, you feel like that is the full funding amount that you need in order to keep up the pace
No.
that you would like?
100,000 would only allow us to do half the fields at half the preferred maintenance standard.
Got it. So I think that's the question that essentially you were asking. So now that we've hit it on the head, 100,000 gets you to half. 200,000 will get you to the full capacity of what you think you could be.
100 gets you half of half.
There's two factors here. The 100,000 only lets us get to half of the fields in the park system at half of the desired maintenance standard. So half of the fields would get 2 treatments per year, one in the spring, one in the fall. The desired full implementation would be all of the fields would get 4 treatments, 2 in the spring, 2 in the fall.
That's a $400,000.
That's a $400,000 annual cost.
So we can
And I did,
fund this if we add 300,000
yeah.
of the 100,000.
And for the record, we did inform Pam of this. These are not one-time costs. These are ongoing costs.
This is your annual maintenance.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, at the very least, I think we should add the Tier 1 to the reconciliation list if there's an interest in adding funding for that, or in requesting that the department look at the lapse cushion for the additional 100 or 200 or
Yes.
300,000 to meet that need. I think that might be another opportunity to take a look at that as well, to make this a top priority for any budget flexibility that is found, that could be 100, 200, or 300,000 to that as a priority of the council, and to report back to us on that.
Yes, and this is what I was trying to get at, is that when we have lapse in excess of what we budgeted, this is precisely what we try to do. We take the list of things that we've talked about with you, 6 months out, 3 months out for the end of the year, say, okay, we've got some extra end of year money, how are we going to spend it? This is exactly the thing that we target. And we think that's why that flexibility is important, but it's also why we don't believe you should be getting nervous about it, because we're not like drawing up these lists out of nowhere. We're funding things that we have reached consensus with the council that these are the priorities.
So let me suggest this then. How about, so this is a reconciliation list. This 250 is a reconciliation list item. Perhaps we could do 200,000 for nutrient management, so that the total reconciliation list add would be 350, and then see if the cushion that the lapse resources are sufficient with additional conversation for the full 4-year level. So what we have here is a $250,000 recommendation to the reconciliation list. We could make that $350,000. And then that would be enough to take the nutrient management to half of the full annual potential.
I thought, is that
And then, well, I'm going to, he wanted us to do the same thing, except for Councilman Friedson suggesting that the lapse could be the remainder of the difference.
That's what I agree with that. I think that's what we should do.
I was trying to, okay. Well,
Yeah, well,
we just don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, here's what I would suggest. If we were going to go above it and beyond what the department is requesting, I think we should at least do 2 tranches and do the 250,000 as a tranche, and then an additional 100,000 for the athletic field nutrient as a second item on the reconciliation list, that, you know, it would be, if we can do it, we'll do it, but if we can't do it, I'd hate to see that we lose, you know, because it becomes an all or nothing
So a
is the
250
challenge.
And then a 1.
And then either way,
200 additional through labs.
yeah, either way, yeah, it's looking at, you know, to do the full amount. We'd like to see the full amount, or as close to the full amount done as possible, and would like you to look at the lapse, and maybe we can get a report back to the committee, you know, by December 1st on how the lapse looks and what ability there is in order to meet, you know, half or all of the recommended maintenance for the fields. Is that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And I think this underscores why we just need to come back and get reports on what you're doing with it. Again, not that this is a perfectly good example of what you have done in previous years of taking a council priority, going to the list. We just need to understand, everyone needs to be on the same page, the public included, about how that's happening as you work to reduce the lapse, right, and hire folks through the great strategies you talked about. But I think that's a good way to do it, 2 tranches and use the lapse.
All right, so, again, current unfilled positions is 20%. Historic lapse is more like 10%. This assumption is 7.5%. So there's clearly, you know, we hope you can get from 20 to 10 quickly. You know, I don't know how realistic that is, honestly. Okay, let's continue.
That's really it on the park budget, unless you had anything to say about the fees. The one thing the park staff might look at is whether some of this addition could be taken from fund balance from FY22, in addition to what they've already taken from fund balance.
We don't have a lot left. I mean, we've moved money around and by the way, this maybe is a good time to point out that in some cases, if we can't hire staff, we'll do the same work with contractors. So, you know, it's not just a question of moving money into some other thing that's also a priority. It's a question of, like, how are you going to do the work versus hiring somebody. But we've moved this money in order to take advantage of the unusual situation where we got a lot of labs to get a lot of this stuff done. We might have a little bit left over at the end, but it's not like we're talking millions and millions of dollars.
The proposed fund balance for FY23 is $5.1 million. That doesn't include the 630,000 that you're moving with this recommendation.
Sorry, say that again, Jeff?
They have $5.1 million in ending fund balance proposed in their FY23 budget.
Where are you, you're looking at their budget, you're not in
I'm
the.
looking at their budget. It's a macro table, page 41 of their budget.
And in the period since our submitted budget, we've moved this money to backfill some of these things I'm talking about. So it's that number is not current.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, when we have personnel savings, we go to the planning board in open session with a memorandum, and we state exactly how much savings there is and what we're moving it towards, whether it's supplies and materials or contractual item, any type of non-personnel. It's a commission requirement. We cannot just spend lapsed personnel savings on a contract or a piece of equipment or a bucket truck. We have to move it formally from the personnel category to the correct supply and material contracts. It's all transparent, it's all open. And if you were looking at those memos, you would see that we're moving money to priorities that the council has espoused. Things like trails,
I don't
things
think
like,
anyone's questioning that.
yeah,
Don't worry.
electric equipment, electrifying our fleet. Things, so it all, I just want to be clear, that was at the time of budget submission. We have moved millions of dollars in personnel savings and actually committed it towards those things already.
Fortunately, there's a lot of alignment, or there's alignment between the commission and the council on your agenda. We work very closely on what that should be. So,
And a lot of this money is just on things like supplies. It's not like, should we do some other program? It's more like, do we have an opportunity to buy some wood chips or something that's going to be materials that will be broadly useful for no matter what we're doing.
okay, so the fund balance, so you'll do a little more, reporting on the fund balance. Apparently that's been allocated. There's something else I was going to mention, but it seems to have. While you're here on the parks topic and the fields topic, we recently, the Education Committee approved funding from the CUP fund balance to get to the next batch of schools that have not had parks take over the field maintenance. Do you have any information for us about that today?
It just so happens with you.
Okay, good.
So, as you know, the council's been strongly supportive of spending CUP fund balance to help to knock out these school field renovations, so they can be taken into the parks maintenance program. We have many times over the past 2 years exchanged lists of schools with MCPS to make sure that we were on the same page as to which sites were going to be renovated. What you see in front of you is slides. The first one is the schools we've done since 17 when you helped us revive this program, and the second list is the schools that remain. We had not heard until 2 weeks ago that MCPS had any questions about this. And as I say, we've exchanged this list back and forth with them many times. It changes a lot, primarily because we get new information about modifications to the MCPS capital program. They'll tell us, hey, you can't do this school that you were planning on doing because we're going to put an addition on it, or we're going to put some portables there, or we have a major renovation scheduled, so we need that area for staging area. So it probably would not be a good idea to do the field at that location when you were planning on doing it. Other than that, our plan has been to work through all the middle and elementary schools that can physically accommodate renovations and then allow for permitted as well as MCPS use on a sustainable and cost-effective basis. That's most of the schools. There are a few that just won't work. But we've been working through those lists, and what you see on the second slide is the ones we have left. If you were to apply some other criteria, like an equity lens, I think you'd find a lot of these schools are in equity areas and would meet those criteria as well. But the main reason that these schools are on the list is because that's what's left to do. And as we've told you, and I think you have accepted this in the past and agreed with it, that the goal is to get through all the schools and then start over at the beginning. So we get to East Silver Spring Elementary again, so we get to Eastern Middle School. Some of these that were done years ago, which now need a new renovation, so we can be in a position to manage them on a cost-effective and sustainable basis going forward. None of this should be news to MCPS. In fact, we have, as I say, and I want to underscore it, we have exchanged lists with them repeatedly, many times in public and in private, and we've briefed this list to you in open session with them present in the past. So I don't know, I'm not sure where this is coming from, this idea that we have not provided or communicated this information to MCPS. If they have any questions about this, and I have emailed Seth just this morning to say, hey, if you have issues with this, let us know. Here it is. You've got the same, we're all looking at the same list of schools that are left to go through the first cycle of renovations. If you think we should be looking at different schools, please, we're all ears.
Great. Well, it does seem like there are some communication gaps, so let's try to get our hands around this now. Let's get this resolved. I don't know why, we seem to have heard from schools that they don't know what this list is, so we should,
Agreed, and appreciate the list. So the blue list is what hasn't been done, and I guess my question is, are all of these in really bad disrepair? Or, what is that? How are we weighing
Yes.
that?
Yes, they get little to no maintenance. MCPS staff will tell you the same thing, that the school groundskeeper really doesn't have a budget or the time to deal with the field. at the ICB meeting, I showed photos we just took of two of Fairland Elementary and Cloverly Elementary. I mean, I wish I could put them up on the screen. There's erosion in the infields of invasive vines growing on the backstops, weeds everywhere, and very little turf. I mean, they're schools that just do not get cared for. They're fields that do not get cared for, excuse me.
Okay. All right, well, I agree. I mean, obviously, it remains a priority, so that's why we took the action last week, so hopefully we can continue.
And is the funding that the EC committee recommended, is that enough?
No. So when we first in front of you, the proposal was for $300,000 a year to come out of the CUP funding. I advised the committee at that point that we had been funded in prior years to the tune of $600,000. And if we were funded at that level, we could knock out these remaining schools in under 3 years. So $600,000, we can knock it out in 3 years at only $300,000 a year. It's going to take 6 years to get through these schools, 5 to 6 years, before we can return to the others. And, life cycle renovation of a field is an interesting concept, but, most brick and mortar assets you can peg 15 years, 20 years on. A field, it depends on the use and how it was built. There's an argument that you should be doing life cycle renovations of the most heavily used fields every 3 to 5 years, not every 20 years. And most of these fields that we hit early in the program, we didn't have what I call the Cliff Driver era. We have the new grasses, we have the new technology, the new equipment, and the new knowledge. So the renovations we've done that I showed you since 17 are much more impactful than the renovations we did 20 years ago. So this is an ongoing program. I just think 5 years is too long for us to get these 21 schools done, and I would prefer to be funded at $600,000 a year.
And that's what the committee recommendation gets you to 600 for this year, right?
If the GO bonds hold, the committee through FY20.
CIP reconciliation.
That gets us to that number,
Yes,
which is what
For this year.
just for this year.
The 300 from the CUF fund balance was a one-year recommendation, so we will need to identify those resources for next year, assuming we can hold both the CUF recommendation and the GO bonds. So both of your funding sources for that are up in the air. Essentially, 600,000 is up in the air. It's the CUP and the GO bonds. So we need to land that successfully so that you can continue through this program. Okay.
Got 3 of the 5 here,
Yeah.
I think.
Right. And, I think there's general strong support at the council for it. I think there's confusion, so I think we need to share this around with everybody so that it's clear. So how come this doesn't have every school? Again, remind us why every MCPS school is not on this page, is either already renovated or planned to be renovated, just because you don't need to, I presume, right?
Well, around the year 2000, we just did a slew of school renovations.
Okay.
And then the program went into hiatus until FY17. And in FY17, there was a bunch of schools left, elementary and middle schools, that Parks had no role in. We had never done the life cycle renovation, therefore they were not in our maintenance program. We set up a bunch of objective criteria, we rated them, and we started hitting the highest priority fields first. And we're just not done. There's 21 fields left that we've never touched. We have no role in as of today.
And one of the things that would be helpful, and I think we talked about this before, Mike, and I'm glad Councilman Reamer asked this in this way. If you take an East Silver Spring, it's got to be just as bad as some of these, or worse. I can't imagine there's a field much worse than that. I mean, and so the question is, I think we need to know whether or not the order you take is fine. I understand the equity issue of these never got done. And so even if they're not as bad as one that did get done 20 years ago, which has to be the case because of usage and just, we should still know where they rank, to his point of the schools that aren't on this list.
Yes.
I think we want to have a sense of where all of them are. So we're just transparent about, we know these are crappy, and we're, depending on how much money we get, we're, and it's our job to do that for you. we're going to move at this rate of pace. You know what I'm saying? I just think we have to.
100%.
we have
I
to
agree
say
with
that.
you 100%. We should be, it's like an infrastructure report. We should be listing all the fields and putting true numbers behind what they really need so that the true magnitude of the program
We can
is
know the
clear.
scope, and then the voters or whoever, they
Yeah.
tell us to do it or not. You
I
know?
agree.
So I just think
Do
that
that.
that's missing from this, because you look at this, you think, oh, these are the only bad schools, and that's definitely not the case, as far as fields. So.
All right. Could we maybe ask for like a memo that has this in it and that just lays these things out on paper? And I think that we can circulate, and council can see it, MCPS can see it. We can literally all get on the same page. I think that would be helpful.
We'll do that.
Yeah.
In the memo, I think it'd be helpful at the current level of funding with the actions that have been taken, the timeline, and then once we get to fully renovate, you talked about coming back to those fields that a long time ago were renovated and need to be redone, because that's part of this process as well. Like, what is the regular maintenance schedule once we get through the full list, and what's the amount of the ongoing funding that would require? At current dollars. Of course, that's subject to change as we move on and things get more expensive. But I think it'd just be important in that memo for context for us to all agree and understand. Here's the timeline of when we expect to get through the blue list here. And then once we get through it, here's what we should all be prepared to do if we want to maintain all the work that we have spent so many years focusing on. I just think that's an important part of the conversation, because nobody wants to have the mission accomplished banner behind us and then somebody looking at a field saying, well, wait a minute, I'm seeing a lot of folks talking about how great things are and mission doesn't seem accomplished while my kid is playing on a field that looks less than the standards. And that's not your issue, that's our issue, because you need the funding in order to do it. But I just think we should be eyes wide open in this memo and understand, okay, what does that level of commitment actually look like, and then what percentage of that can we actually hit?
We will absolutely do that, and I thank you for pointing that out, because both of the programs are ongoing. The capital piece for periodic life cycle renovation of the most heavily used fields, and then every time we do add a field, each one of these 21 fields, we will come back in the subsequent budget with an OBI for the ongoing maintenance. And just for magnitude of scale, the budget for the fields that we have, the school fields we have in our program, the operating budget maintenance contract is about $1.8 million. It's a lot of money going into caring for those fields that we have renovated.
Great. East Silver Spring is the field that started us all on this 7-8 years ago. I heard from PTA that they were out watering the new field after that school was renovated. And I started asking some questions, and we found out that after the recession, that program hadn't been reinitiated. And so we started to do that. Councilmember Duando and Albernoz and others proposed accelerating it, and I think that's awesome. So let's see if we can't get a real clear strategy written down, and that will help shape future funding agreements, because council is committed to making this happen. I think what has been making it difficult is all the confusion, not the support. Like, we've got the support, so help us lay out that roadmap, and I think that will help propel the funding strategy that you need for it. Okay, let's keep going.
Okay, I think we're going to now be able to turn over to the administration fund portion of the operating budget, and this starts on page 14 of the staff report. The administration fund, as I earlier mentioned, includes the central administrative services, the commissioner's office, and the planning department. The Mncppc budget request is a little over $37 million. It represents a 9.6% increase over the FY22 adopted budget. The executive recommends a little over $36 million, which is a difference of about $1 million. And you can see the summary of that at the bottom of page 14. The commissioner's office is, relatively small. and its budget request for this fiscal year is a slight decrease from FY22. The planning department, which is probably the largest piece of the administration fund, is summarized on the next page on 15. It's staffed and managed through numerous divisions, which are listed in the chart, with the dollar amounts that they were funded at in FY22, and then what's requested for FY23, and the associated change in those funding request levels. And then a similar chart for work years is on the next page, but this is summarized more by what the planning department actually does, which is master planning, regulatory planning, information resources, and management and administration. And there's no proposed staffing changes for FY23. As you know, you have a semi-annual report that's every fall, that's a check-in, and every spring that is really a preparation for what the planning department will be coming today to talk about for their upcoming work program as approved part of this operating budget. The master plan schedule that you saw at the semi-annual is only slightly different from the one that's in the budget book. You know the budgets are put together in the fall, so there is quite a bit of time lag. And in the semi-annual that came in the just about a month ago, Friendship Heights Urban Design Study / Sector Plan was still on the list, but was slightly changed. It no longer was showing a sectional map amendment or a hearing, indicating it was no longer a master plan, sectional plan, but more of a study. So just wanted to note that with a slightly different deadline. And that would be the only new plan, or I guess study type plan. The rest are other initiatives and studies that have a request associated with them for professional service funding. Page 17 gives you a kind of a summary update on what's coming up before this council or the next one by year. So you have you have 22, 23, and 24 regarding master plans, and then you have the studies and initiatives.
Okay, I had a question about studies and initiatives, but did you want to share? I mean, you've got a great work program. We did talk to it at a very high level at full council. But Gwen Wright, welcome.
Thank you. For the record, Gwen Wright, Planning Director. I don't think I have a whole lot to add. The work program is one that we try hard to plan out in a logical way over a period of years. A number of the projects that you see on page 17 that are going to be delivered to the council are ones that you have already included in previous work programs and that we are in the midst of working on. We have others that, including the Silver Spring Communities Plan that will come, I think, in 2025, and then we're adding the Friendship Heights study, which is a study, not a master plan. So we also do a variety of studies and initiatives, which are listed on page 17. And I will say that in our reconciliation list, two of the projects on page 17 are what we're putting on the reconciliation list, the parking lot design study and the comprehensive study of redevelopment tools. I know that there may be interest in other projects for us to take on. We always have a little ability to take on unbudgeted initiatives if they are not too time consuming. For example, the whole street renaming effort, which ended up taking a fair amount of time, was an unbudgeted initiative, but we were able to squeeze it in by grabbing a little time from our preservation staff, time from my deputy director, Tanya Stern, sort of cobbling together a team to make that happen. And we always have the ability, when there is a council request like that, to try to fulfill it without necessarily adding to the work program. However, if it gets to a point where it's big and where we might need consultant assistance to help us accomplish it, then we sort of have to look at our list and say, okay, what are we not going to do, and substitute instead this new project or ask for even more money.
Great. Well, I wanted to just put on the table the idea of doing some economic research into the cost of development. You know, it's a issue that we're always hearing about, and clearly development is proceeding in some ways, some sectors, in some locations, and it's not proceeding in other ways, in other sectors, in other locations. So it's a complex story, and I think it's important for us to always have a clear view of how the policies that we put in place affect the balance sheet of getting what we want. And fundamentally, that's what master plans do, is they lay out a community vision of what we want to achieve, and then we rely substantially on the private sector to make that happen through investment. And, you know, we hear from a lot of people that the policies that we put into place affecting that ability of private sector to do that are holding us back. Given that it's a complex story, I think it really benefits from some external analysis, so wanted to see if that might be something you could develop and, you know, come up with a way for us to have a clearer view of the, you know, the cost of doing projects in the county and how to think about that as we consider whether, you know, our policies are, what might need to change.
Yeah, I think that is a very important, interesting, and complex topic to study. And I know there have been multiple efforts to try to study that in one way, shape, or form over the years. I know Jeff stepped away, but I think actually even back when Jeff worked for Park and Planning, we were asked to try to do a similar kind of analysis. It is complicated because it's not as simple as just looking at fees, you know, application fees and impact taxes and so forth. It's looking at the impact of other kinds of legislation, whether it be, you know,
Stormwater.
building sustainability, or, you know, whatever those topics are and how they sort of add together. We could certainly do a study, and that would be possible. I would give you like sort of two options on how that could proceed. We would need outside consultant support for that. We do have some real estate experts on staff, but we would need probably some outside consultant support. We could either switch out the study you just described for the comprehensive study of redevelopment tools that I think we've briefed each of you individually on, which we had on the reconciliation list for $125,000 in consultant dollars, or because that is a very important study, but as pointed out by council staff, it could wait a year. It's not one that where there is a you know, an immediate time push to do it. So if you were more interested in the cost of development study, we could switch that out, but it would still end up being on the reconciliation list. The other option would be to add a second study to have us do comprehensive study of redevelopment tools and add another study probably for about $125,000 to the reconciliation list. And again, you know, that's stretching our in-house resources. As you've seen, we don't have any additional staff being requested for fiscal year 23. We have a small but very hardworking group of folks in our research and strategic projects group. They would be managing both of those projects, so it might stretch them a little bit, but those would be two possible approaches.
And I just wanted to add that it would be helpful to the incentive density implementation project for that to be informed by some of the information about costs of some exactions, things like not just the ones that Gwen mentioned, but affordable housing, BLTs. You're about to consider probably some changes to the forest conservation law, stormwater management. There's a whole bunch of things, some of which overlap with some of those CR incentive density recommendations, some which don't. But if we did those at the same time, there's a logic to sort of doing that simultaneously so that can inform the other project.
That's a good point. That's interesting. Okay, well, why don't we have some general conversation here, and then, yeah, Councilmember Juwan.
Appreciate that. I think scoping that out, I'd want to make sure we did a little work, not here today, but I know the conversation's hopefully helpful, of when you say cost of development, that even saying that could mean, as you said, it's complex, could mean a range of things. And I think scoping it out appropriately would be important. As far as if you are going to bring on a consultant about, what the things we're hoping to look into. I do think the redevelopment tools is an important piece of that. And so, I think it is an important question. There are some limitations to what we can know based on the ability for, one, it's different in different places, right, parts of the county. Two, the information that we receive, we actually have to, all the transactions and what it costs based on what type of development opportunity it is. But there's smart people out there. I'm sure we could get some examples. But I think it's a good idea. Generally, I'd be very interested in how we scoped it out and what we were saying that we want to find out and what are the components. And I wouldn't want that to be very balanced and just transparent about what those things were. So I guess my question is on the redevelopment tools. Could you just 30 seconds about, again, what you're hoping to learn from that, again, just to remind us?
Sure. I think, in a way, it's almost the flip side of the question about how much does redevelopment cost. It's really what kinds of innovative tools are there that could make redevelopment easier.
Right.
And it's things like new types of building materials, mass timber or some prefabricated kinds of units, really studying that. It's new zoning tools like form-based codes that give more certainty when a applicant is coming forward, so they know exactly what the expectations are, and hopefully that ends up saving time. There are a variety of tools that we think we should explore to try to make redevelopment both more efficient, but also able to be of greater benefit to the county as well. So, again, it's almost the flip side of how much does it cost is what could we do to make it more efficient.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. That's helpful. And I would suggest that we not get rid of that. I think that's an important conversation. So if we're going to add something, I'd like to see us add them both to the reconciliation list as opposed to swapping them out. But because I do think that you need to have those conversations in tandem. So, all right, thank you.
Yeah, I'll just note, I have been working with an infrastructure work group on trying to look at opportunities or possibilities to come up with different ideas for impact taxes. And one of the conversations as part of that is to figure out how much do all the different things cost in Montgomery County, and how do you do a comparison jurisdiction by jurisdiction. And the reality is, after a year's worth of conversation, it's very hard to quantify that in a really clear apples to apples way, because in one jurisdiction there are proffers and there are special taxing districts, and there's a different way to fund affordable housing and to create affordable housing. And so how do you quantify the cost of the Mpdu program, the forest conservation laws, the stormwater management laws? These things are different and they really change on a case-by-case basis. And so coming up with exactly what the difference is really challenging. So the only thing that I would suggest is, if we are going to include something, that we really think through of what are we actually going to get out of it. Because I am a little bit concerned that we go down a rabbit hole of trying to figure out an answer, and we end up with a lot of work and a lot of time and some modest degree of money being invested in something that I'm not sure on a macro scale, might be as helpful as we would want. I am all for figuring out, why is it more expensive to build things here than in other places, or to, follow that to its natural conclusion, or how do we make things easier to do business here, or make it less expensive to build, particularly housing and office. But I just want to make sure that if we are adding things to work programs, that we really think through what it is we're actually going to achieve and how actionable the results are going to be. And I'm not quite sure I fully understand what that would be, at least from this vantage point at this moment in time.
Fair enough. I think it needs to be developed, and we could certainly ask for planning to give that some careful thought and then come back to us with a little bit more of a strategy or a roadmap.
We can certainly do that. I think, as I think Councilmember Friedson is saying, you just have to be ready when you ask a question to understand what the answers may be, and if there is some change that's possible with those answers. If there is state legislation on stormwater management that is stricter in the state of Maryland than in Virginia, for example, so that we have to do a different kind of stormwater management, that is important to know, and it may, in the long term, lead to advocacy to maybe make changes on a state level, but all of the trends I see are to actually make the rules even stricter, not more lenient. So again, it would be good information to have, but it may not provide a clear path forward on how to solve some of the cost issues.
I think it would be healthy, though, if there were more transparency about what the costs are, because it might brush some people back from the plate when they say, oh, well, how about adding X, Y, or Z additional requirement, to just remember, hey, that all sounds great, but look at what the bill is now and think about what that means for the total picture. I certainly appreciate Councilmember Friedson's maybe mild skepticism. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but I think it would be productive, perhaps, to just have a little bit more of a dollar sign next to each one of these things, so people just understood, if you want to propose more of this, that's what it's going to cost, and what are you willing to give up? And if you're not willing to give something up, what are you saying about, are we really going to add more and more cost when we already recognize that costs here of building stuff are.
Yeah, I mean, at a simple level, I could envision like we're a regional market, right? A regional market metric that has many of the significant costs kind of laid out, as you said, in a financial impact. And then it doesn't necessarily, I don't know that it proposes what to change as much as it just simply states what is. So we had an OLO report at one point try to get into this, and it came back with a sort of a murky conclusion, which I think sort of in some ways gets at what you're saying. But if we could do, to the extent that we could do apples to apples, I think we should always know it. I think that's a lot of the core issue is that there's always confusion about it. So.
Yeah, I share the same goal. I'm just concerned, the same thing with the OLO report. I mean, with the best of intentions, with a lot of work and a lot of expertise, the answer was, it's complicated, basically. I'm thinking about like the magic 8-ball, and we're looking for the answer. We sit there and we shake a lot for a really long time, and then the answer keeps coming up, somewhat inconclusive, or ask again later. And I'm just a little bit concerned that, we're going to hold out hope on this. I will say on the new, there's two different aspects here. One is what exists today. One is what is going to be proposed moving forward, or changes proposed moving forward. And I will say we are supposed to have this analysis. I pushed for a bill to have an economic impact statement on all legislation that we put forward. Of course, that doesn't carry over to state laws and other requirements that carry on to ours and layer on top of ours, some less stringent, some more stringent. But we are supposed to be weighing the impact on not just our budget, but on the budgets of businesses and of residents and of the viability of projects. So, I think we could improve those economic impact statements, to be honest with you, to include some of these in a more detailed analysis. But I do think that this is complicated to come up with data that is useful and actionable. And I would hate for us to spend a lot of effort and a lot of time and some degree of money on something that's not necessarily actionable. So that would be just my only view. But I share the interest. I think it would be helpful for us to compare in a regional marketplace how we compare with others.
I mean, can I just lastly say, I think this should be a topic of ongoing effort to understand and make changes. I can imagine maybe the next council wants to say, hey, why don't we look at some of these cost issues and try to make some change. And then the first thing that's going to be said is, well, we better study what we better study the situation. And so there's a year. I think the actionable nature of it will be decided in the future, what you're saying, but I think getting some information together would be useful.
Yeah, and I just want to say, knowledge is iterative, right? It's over time and it changes, and you might learn one thing new or something. I do think, but I think to the point that I made, and Councilman Friedson, I think, made in part two, scoping it out before we put it on the list might be the better way to go. And I don't know how quickly you can do that. We could put a placeholder, but I think it's going to be, for me, it's more important or it's just as important.
Could I suggest, which one of these would be the best, if we wanted to put it in with? Is it the density incentive and double that? Is it the redevelopment tools, or is it standalone?
Well, I do sort of see it as standalone, but if the idea would be to combine it with something, I would say probably the comprehensive study of redevelopment tools, because that could also be a study of costs of redevelopment and of new redevelopment tools.
And I'll give you an example of something that I would want to be as known as possible as part of this, right? Like one of the costs of redevelopment is what's the profit, that's going to the people who are borrowing the money. What are the returns? And it's been suggested that in the past we shouldn't ask that question. Well, we absolutely should ask that question, and I think we might not be able to know all of the answers, but with any of this, we're not going to be able to know everything perfectly. But I just give it as an example of there's a lot of cost, and so I think we want to approach this in as broad a way as possible to say, okay, well, what are the things that drive cost and development? And there's a full list. It's not just what we do. There's things that other people do too, and we need to be honest about that. So I'd want us to approach it in a full holistic way.
Well, and it is a complicated issue, as we've all discussed. I don't know that we could really realistically get back to you with a scope before you're supposed to vote on the budget.
Right.
Because our staff really would need to take some time to think about it and to think about all the aspects of it. I think that.
Could I suggest we make the redevelopment tools item 175, and then, yeah.
Yeah, and if we need to, as we get into it, if we go out to bid, if it's higher, we could come back for a supplemental.
And not put the pressure on you to do the scope. I think it's unrealistic in 3 weeks to, you want to talk to us and others. So I would support that.
Concerned about that?
25,000.
50,000 added to the redevelopment.
I'll yield to the indulgence of colleagues here. I will reiterate my skepticism that we're going to get anything valuable for a $50,000 consultant to look at things that we've looked at before that are tough to determine and whether or not we're going to get anything actionable out of it. But if we want to add it to the reconciliation list and see if we can fit it in, I'm happy to oblige.
All right. Gung-ho attitude that we like so much.
That's yeah, sounds like we have two votes for that study.
Wishful thinking. We can make it 3-0, but I think that, yeah,
All right,
I'll believe it when I see it.
let's keep moving.
Okay. Yes, so in the interest of time, if we're looking at page 20 of the staff report, what we've been talking about is the Tier 1 restoration down here, because basically the project that you're discussing adding money to is on that Tier 1 reconciliation. Above that, you'll see a table where the planning has proposed certain savings, things they can pre-fund, but that does remain to have a Tier 1 that they've recommended they can cut to meet the CE's budget, but if the committee wanted to restore something, that's the items there. You see the Tier 1 item is the study of redevelopment tools, which you've now just added $50,000 to. And then the tier, item 2 on Tier 1 is the parking lot design study. You could also choose to do one and not the other now that you've added funding to the first item. And then they do have a Tier 2 for restoration, which has to do with, and it's a small amount, but for some professional development and CIP increases. So it's whatever the committee wants to recommend to the council. I will just remind you, this gets to the amount of time to prepare something new. This is going to the full council on Monday. So the staff report for this will be due in 2 days on Wednesday.
All right, so under what we just discussed, Tier 2 would go up by 50 to 235. Is that right? I think that's right. Did I say Tier 2?
Tier
I
1.
meant Tier 1.
Tier 1, right.
Tier 1. Okay.
So the committee's recommending the whole Tier 1.
I certainly support that. Yep.
Say that one more time. I'm sorry. What
Tier
page?
1.
Just the entire Tier 1, it's the bottom of page 20.
Packet page 20. Memo page 20.
Tier 1 being the 185.
Correct, and that needs to go up by 50.
Going up to 235. Yes.
Okay.
Well, we came in and got more than you were asking for.
Doing more work than they proposed to do. All right. Okay. And then we will not add Tier 2.
Correct.
All right.
Keep moving?
Keep moving.
Okay. We're now going to do central administrative services. They provide the administrative functions for both Montgomery and Prince George's portions of the bi-county agency. And you will see that the FY23 portion of the CAS budget before chargebacks is about $9.8 million, an increase of about 6.1% over the FY22 adopted budget. And you'll see at the bottom of page 21 a breakdown of the FY21 compared to the FY23 budgets for all the different departments that are part of CAS. And if you turn the page onto 22, this gets at how the CAS budget be modified to meet the CE's budget.
Okay, let's accept all the rest of the staff recommendations, and I think we're done here.
Okay, so that would mean that we're restoring the Tier 1 for CAS. It's a small amount, but necessary for their staffing levels.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And then just so you know, special revenue funds are here, their balances are here, and part of the appropriation covers that, but there was no question and no conflicts with that. Just wanted it in the packet.
Thank you.
With that, we're done.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, we do have the CIP state aid money real quick for Mncppc. I almost forgot. That is a separate packet that you have for today. It was labeled, I don't remember, but for item 1B. And this was the state aid funding for all the various projects. And so park staff have provided a very detailed list of all the different places in the CIP where the state funding would go. Details about what the actual project would be. The state is usually very specific about what they're funding when they provide this additional money. And so Parks has indicated in every case what that is for. It ends up being for a little over $12 million, and then in addition, there's an allocation for program open space. I think it would be straightforward. Council staff supports all of the recommendations as outlined by the board and the Department of Parks in their submission.
All right, it's a record haul. It's a record haul, $12.3 million. Oh, hi.
Hi, Shantae Jackson, Office of Management and Budget. I just wanted to communicate one thing about the executive branch and park and planning working on the revised PDFs for the lot 10 and 24, the Women's Farm Market. Just to convey that we are working with park and planning on that to reflect the state aid projects. And as soon as we have that completed, we'll continue to keep Councilmember Friesen's office abreast and bring those PDFs back. We're working with park and planning, county, developers, and also the town of Chevy Chase. So as soon as we finalize the core principles, we'll come back with those PDFs. But just wanted to make sure that was clearly communicated.
And if you could keep my office abreast as well.
As well, yes.
As the council member who fought really hard to get that into the master plan and is continuing to insist that we get it done.
Yes.
And I appreciate Councilmember Friesen's detailed work to push the process forward.
How about the whole committee? Why don't we do
Yeah.
Apologize.
Keep everybody involved.
I do
Keep me out of trouble here, Shantae, please.
You were
Appreciate it.
in getting that financial gap closed recently, and that your name came to mind. But
I appreciate it.
Keep everyone abreast.
I appreciate it. Just to note, I mean, this is one example of many, but our state delegation really stepped up here, and we asked for 3 really important parks projects that I think, Long Branch, Wheaton, and here this Central Park project that was critical to the Bethesda Downtown Plan. It has geographic diversity. It's a significant amount of funding. It's on the heels of the $10 million we got last year related to the Pepco Power Line Trail. I mean, we really owe quite a bit. And I'll say, just to be clear so everybody understands, for clarity here, there's $2.5 million that'll be included in this through the county. There's additional $1 million, $500,000 over the next 2 years. $500,000 was pre-authorized for next year, $500,000 this year that's going through the town of Chevy Chase that the District 18 delegation helped with, the District 16 delegation helped, and Delegate Corman and Zucker with the with that as well. So it's really $3.5 million from the state here. We've got parks funding. It's a really complicated financial arrangement between the state, the county, the Parks Department, the private sector, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The town of Chevy Chase that deserves credit for really stepping up and providing a significant amount of funding. And I think the level of complication and commitment reflects the importance of this as a priority. And I appreciate Chair Reamer for your leadership on this prior to the other PHED committee members being on the council here, really making sure that that was a central part of the Bethesda Downtown Plan. But really excited about the progress here and appreciate executive branch and park and planning working together to deal with the financial aspects of this.
Great. It's approved.
Yeah. It's our resident.
He likes to get the money, yeah.
Disproportionately our residents' money, to be honest.
All right, so our next item. All right. everyone.
All right, please, conversations to the hall, conversations to the hall.
All right, where is my gavel? Need more gaveling around here. Okay. Okay, Lavu has prepared a packet for us on the topic of the proposed Office of the People's Council, and we're joined by Meredith Wellington and Ken, and is that Julie Knight? Okay, terrific. Lavu.
Is that mic on? Yes. Perfect. So the recommended budget for the Office of the People's Council is about $225,000, most of which is for 2 full-time employees. So the mission of this office is to protect the public interest in land use hearings, as well as providing technical assistance. As far as public testimony so far, Council has received both written and oral testimony, all in support of appropriating these funds. Since this office has not been funded in a while, I'm going to do a little bit of a history lesson, if the committee will indulge me. So the office was actually created in 1990, but it was not funded until 1999. And in that time, from 1999 to 2002, Council actually passed 3 different bills. And then in fiscal year 2011, so reviewing it in 2010, there was, of course, a serious fiscal situation, and the committee decided to not appropriate funds, and Council agreed with that decision as well. At the time, the committee had also considered restructuring the office or using a contractor. So to give a little more background on the history of the office, there was actually an OLO report done in 2008. It's a very long, very thorough, very well done report. I attached it to the packet, but since today we're focusing on budget, I'm going to try not to get too much into the substantive issues in the report other than where they're helpful for this decision the committee has before it. So OLO's recommendation in 2008 when reviewing the Office of the People's Council, which had been for about 10 years at the time they were reviewing it, their recommendation was to revisit the purpose, duties, and structure of the office as outlined in the existing legislation, and then I did attach the existing legislation to the packet. It comes right after the memo. And OLO recommended postponing any personnel decisions about reappointing a People's Council until the Council had reviewed the legislation itself. So starting at the bottom of page 3 of the staff report, you'll see a list of the questions that have come up over the decades in both creating, reviewing, and defunding the office. Really big ones are what the purpose of the office even should be, who the office should represent, what the People's Council authority should be, who their director should be, and whether there should be a sunset provision. And one additional complicating factor is, I mentioned there were those 3 bills between 1990 and 2002, and looking at the history, Council changed its mind about certain things each time it was reviewed, and of course this was a council from many councils ago. So the OLO report did state that most of the feedback about the office was positive. OLO talked to land use attorneys, they talked to community members, they talked to council staff, they talked to council members, council member staff, different agencies. The big ones here, because it's land use, would be, of course, the Office of Zoning and Administrative Hearings, as well as Planning Board, and then whoever the land use attorney was at the time. So Jeff Science. And then as well, there was, despite most of the positive feedback and ratings, there was a lot of negative feedback, and almost all of it tended towards a lack of clarity. So, for example, members of the community are like, okay, this office is here to help me with my land use and zoning application, but they would be disappointed that they weren't getting as much advocacy as they wanted because it was unclear if the People's Council was supposed to even be doing advocacy. Another one was the People's Council participated in community liaison committees. That was not actually something specifically listed in the legislation. So Was he acting out of bounds? So those types of questions came up, and that was all stuff in the OLO report and then taken into account when the council and committee decided to not appropriate funds in 2010. So with all of that background, council staff's recommendation is to not appropriate these funds in this fiscal year 23 budget until there's been a review of the legislation. Reason being, if we appropriate the funds and then the legislation changes, say you shrink the duties or expand the duties, it might change how much money you would like to be appropriated. And the alternative, there is current legislation. Yeah, so it's already in the law, like it's been in the law since
It was there for a while.
Yeah.
It was then defunded in 2010 after being, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So reviewing the current legislation, right. And the alternative, of course, is of the three options council was given in reviewing this budget is deferring this until January and revisiting it after we've had a closer look at the revenues, since we're obviously having a very tricky budget season as council staff tries to cut the budget down a bit. So this would be a good example and a good place of where to wait to appropriate funds to the office until that legislation has been looked at and possibly revised or possibly not revised.
Okay, question?
Just a couple. I mean, I'd like to hear the administration's position. Maybe we're going to do that, Mr. Chairman. But I think, look, we have a law in the books. It wasn't funded. It is a little ambiguous. We have a 2008 OLO report, right? It was, so that's old. I mean, Barack Obama wasn't president yet, and so it makes some good recommendations. But so I guess I want to hear a little bit about why the urgency now. Do you all have answers from your perspective to these questions that were raised in the OLO report, and why you think it's why it was put in this budget and why you think it's important? So whoever wants to answer that.
I'll jump in first. Thank you so much, Councilmember Giwando and Chair Reamer and Councilmember Friedson. The county executive put this in the budget because there was an opportunity to address a longstanding need that I think we all agree that there is an interest in promoting full and fair representation for community members in local planning issues in their communities, and also the need to provide technical assistance to citizens, residents, and organizations in the process on how to best participate in that. That hasn't gone away after many, many years, even though the office has. And with the recent emphasis and realization that there are equity and representation concerns in planning and zoning, an office like this would play an invaluable role. With regards to the issues raised in the OLO report, they are important issues. They do need to be addressed, but without funding, how do you get to address the issues? How do you structure an office that meets council's needs, meets the community's needs, if there are no dollars to back it up at the end of the day?
Well, I think, for example, like this authorities and duties question, right? Like, should the People's Council be authorized to intervene as a party in administrative and adjudicatory proceeding? Or should the subject matter be limited to land use or environmental issues? Like that's a question you don't need staff to address. And that is, as I read it, it's not addressed right now. So, I think, can you speak to that? I mean, it's kind of like cart before the horse. Like, that's a really fundamental. I'm all for People's Council. I'd love someone to call me that one day, the People's Council. But I just think, but go ahead, Ms. Wellington. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Meredith Wellington, for the record, for the county executive. Well, I think we have to begin at the beginning. And the critical function of a People's Council is to develop a complete record and presentation of all relevant information at a hearing. But in addition, before that, to help residents, and honestly, in the job I now have as land use policy, I get calls from departments, help even other agencies understand how the land use laws work and what is an effective tool to have your voice heard and what is not an effective tool. Could be very, very important. And I think I agree completely with Ken, and I know the county executive does, that this could really help with issues of racial equity and social justice, because the very people who need help, there could be much more outreach through this job.
You don't think it'll just be affluent homeowners who are calling the office seeking their help to stop projects in their neighborhood that might
They
have
already know
affordable
all
housing
the
in them?
rules. They already know it all. They don't need a lot of help.
You don't think it's just more to
They know
more?
the process. Well, I think, you noticed, or if you were able to read the packet, that one of the things that the People's Council did was go to the community meetings, the regional community, and I think that could be a useful thing. There are a lot of people at those, but also to go to civic association meetings and go everywhere to explain, and more just to get the word out, I'm here, give me a call or drop by or whatever. So
Okay.
I think that's the very first question, is how do you structure it to get a fair, complete record in a lot of situations, and then that leads you to what
do you
things
do?
you would want to have the person able to do. But intervening and stuff, to me, is down the line. I'm not so sure how. I think that's what leads to this ambiguity as to what position is the person going to take. I noticed that in the Prince George's, the one they have a People's Council who is allowed to participate, and the People's Council can take either position. They can advocate for the developer when they,
sure.
and then they can advocate for residents.
Well, and I know, I appreciate the packet points out that other jurisdictions have these. They do different things in different places, right? Yeah. And so I am not personally, I think the idea of the office is, and generally is not a bad thing to assist people who need help understanding very arcane and complex processes. But I do think we need to be very clear on what the role and scope is. And in a budget year where, as Levu said, we're trying to figure out what we're going to fund. Funding something that it's not really clear 100% to me as I sit here today would be, I think, a little premature. I would ask, no matter what action we take here today, that if you all can take a crack at, I didn't see, at answering these questions. What's your viewpoint? What's the county executive's viewpoint? And we can have that dialogue, and hopefully, and I commit to you to working to update the law, and then I would fund. If we're clear on what it is and what it does, I think it would be appropriate to fund it. I think it's a little premature at this point. I'll defer to colleagues.
Yeah, I appreciate it. First of all, thank you for coming forward, for responding to the questions. I do think it seems a little bit premature at this point. I think council staff's point is well taken. I do think land use and zoning is extremely complicated and very nuanced, and the idea of having resources for residents to be able to understand what this complex environment is and how to navigate through it is important. Now, how we do that, that is a different question, and that's what we need to work through and work out. I appreciate, and first of all, I'll just say, Mr. Hartman has done a really good job of trying to improve the communications between the executive branch and the council, and I very much appreciate that. And that has been a long-standing challenge that we've had since the beginning. It has gotten better, but it's still not perfect. And this would be an example of something that I'm a little disappointed in. This budget item, we heard from residents. There was no discussion, no memo sent to the council, no county executive, chief administrative officer, some senior member of the executive branch reaching out to us and saying, listen, we haven't funded this thing in a dozen years. There's an OLO report that hasn't been touched in 3 presidencies. that has a lot of outstanding questions that up to this point have been unanswered. And here's why I want to do this. Here's why it's important. Here's why this is such an important thing to do. Up to this point, we've heard none of that. And I take at face value that there are a lot of things going on, and we have certainly quite a bit of things happening in county government. But it's hard to reconcile how important of a priority this is for the executive and the executive branch with the fact that we got mass email petitions asking for this to be funded before we heard from any member of the executive branch of the fact that it was being proposed and why. And that's just a tough thing for us to be able to work through and navigate through. So I'll let you respond to that first, and then I'll have a couple other questions and comments.
I'll start, and Meredith can fill in the gaps. Thank you for the compliments, or appreciate that communications has improved. It is, we too received the same petitions you did before the budget was released. It had been a longstanding desire of the county executives to restore this function. It's a legislative branch function. I understand that. But the community needs that were highlighted, given the capacity and, that was available to us, made this something that the executive wanted to put forward for council consideration. Meredith?
Yes, we certainly understand your concerns, and those are very important concerns. As Ken was just saying, this is a county council position, and so it's harder for the executive to define that for the council, but believe me, Councilmember Jawanda, we'll take you up on your offer and suggest changes, because there are many things that could be done to make this more relevant to right now. But it is relevant because, as Councilmember Friedson just said, people are very confused about all the different zoning laws, and this is just going to get more so. This isn't going to go away. So, but we certainly take your concerns very seriously.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I do think if the reason why the answers to the questions haven't been developed is because this is a council function, it seems odd for the county executive to propose it without communicating in any way with the council.
Well, the questions come from the staff report.
Well, the questions came from the OLO report, which is at this point 14 years old.
Right.
So, I mean,
it's hard to know that we should be answering those questions in advance, but I do understand your broader point that to give you a heads up and to explain, why the county executive would like to see this funded now.
Yeah, just the two things. One, just to be clear, council staff was not raising any novel questions. Council staff was reiterating long-standing questions, including why this was defunded once it was looked at, the questions that were asked, and whether or not those questions are being answered in order to reinstate the position. So to suggest that it is unreasonable to expect the executive to have an answer to the questions that were raised, which led to the elimination of the position that he's now proposing be reinstated, there's a disconnect there. I'll just, I'll state that. I do think that if this were the longstanding priority as it has been suggested, then it is at the bare minimum reasonable that the executive or some senior member of the executive's team would reach out to the council to talk about a position that he wants to reinstate that is under the council's purview. And if you do want something funded, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that you have thought through how the position that we're being asked to fund with taxpayer dollars is going to be used. And I think that's really at the heart of what Councilmember Jawanda was talking about and what the council staff report here or memo suggests, and what the OLO report prior to it has gotten to. It's what is the job, who does it serve, and how? And those are basic questions. I mean, we don't need to flesh out specific details before we do everything and fund everything. But if we can't answer basic questions like, what is it going to do, how is it going to work, and who is it going to serve, it's hard to justify the expenditure or the authorization of taxpayer dollars. So I appreciate it. I think that there are some major questions here that are outstanding. I do think we all agree. I certainly agree that it's a very complicated arena that we all operate in, and empowering residents with help in order to navigate through that arena would be helpful and important, and I think could be impactful. But I think there's a lot of questions of how that would work, and I think we need to take some time to think soberly about how it's going to work. I think there are questions that have been raised about the racial equity and social justice lens, and how, you mentioned showing up to civic meetings. There are longstanding questions of how we do our work here, and who shows up to our meetings, who shows up to civic meetings. When we show up to civic meetings, whether or not that is a reasonable representation of the type of community that we have. I don't think that the function from 2008 is still relevant in the modern way in which we think of how county government is supposed to serve. And so I think we have to grapple with all of those thoughts and decisions and figure out, what is the best path forward, and see if we can accomplish this in a way where it actually serves the need that we're discussing. It doesn't seem like we're there yet. And so I think council staff's recommendation to hold off for now at least, and seek further information and further discussion is appropriate.
But would it be fair to say that then there are at least 2 council members interested in pursuing some sort of revisions and refinement and understanding the scope of what the People's Council could do? Because
I think it would be fair. I think you could take Councilmember Joando and my words. I think we're pretty clear of where we are on this, and I'm happy for those who are watching and those who it will be shared with. And I'll let him speak for himself, and I'll speak for myself. But I am fully committed to figuring out tools to better engage residents and to better equip residents, all residents, with understanding what is happening at the county council and what is happening in county government, and how to navigate through the complications of land use and zoning in particular, but county functions broadly. Whether the Office of the People's Council, as it is currently constructed, is the best and most appropriate way to do that, we got a lot of questions and very few, if any, answers up to this point to be able to make a meaningful determination on that. But I'm certainly up for the conversation, and I think we ought to have it. I just don't think it's ready for the outlay of taxpayer dollars to fund it at this point while these questions remain unanswered.
Yeah, and I would say yes. I think definitely open to it. For example, one of the things when I read this, you all know I grew up in Long Branch, and we're trying to preserve the purple line affordability, right? Those residents could use help from a lot of places in understanding what their rights are and what's going on and how to get in the process. So that's just one of the many things that could be envisioned in something like this. And I think, look, no one's confused that the wealthy and well-connected understand how to leverage things better. Of course they do. And that development can have outsized power in those conversations. So anything that helps level the playing field, but in a productive way, and not in a way that seeks to obstruct, I think is something that could be good. And other jurisdictions have these. So that's why I think the details are really important, the duties, what it's called to do, how it's going to operate. And so we need to have that conversation before we fund it. So I'm open to that, and I commit to doing that.
All right, great. Well, we have a committee recommendation that agrees with staff's recommendation. So thank you very much. All right, Gene.
Last but not least.
right. Thank you. In color. I hope the rest of the districts brought a color print.
Easy, easy, easy,
Right.
easy, easy.
Well, the people that aren't that bright out.
Thorough. He's thorough. She's thorough.
Okay.
Black and white next time.
Gene, take us in.
Thank you, Mr. Reamer. So, excuse me?
We do have a hard stop here. Hopefully, we can get through this by 12:30.
Okay. I don't believe it'll take that long, but I'll
Less.
be expeditious.
Good.
So we're joined here today for the Urban Districts budget. As always, grateful for the work from our partners on the executive side to pull this information together. As noted, you have your regional service center directors for the respective urban districts. They not only manage the regional service centers' roles and functions, but they also help oversee these urban districts. The recommendation from Mr. Elrich for fiscal 23 is a modest increase over fiscal 22, about $418,000 for all three urban districts. These urban districts provide a higher level of services to three areas in the county: Bethesda, Silver Spring, and Wheaton. As such, the county levies an additional property tax for that, and we also use revenues from the parking lot districts to also supplement these budgets. I will go through each urban district separately. I think that's the easiest way, Mr. Reamer, and we'll just go alphabetically as it is in the packet. So I'll start with Bethesda. The Bethesda Urban District, the executive is recommending about $140,000 increase to this. Most of that is to an inflationary adjustment for the Bethesda Urban Partnership. As noted in the packet, unlike Wheaton and Silver Spring, BUP, or Bethesda Urban Partnership, helps implement the county's urban district efforts in Bethesda. We do have one staff there to help oversee that contract and the county's duties there. As noted in the packet, based on executive staff's estimate, the recommendation is about a 4.7% increase over the base fiscal 22 contract. Other contracts received and recommend 6% increase for nonprofits, and BUP has not received an increase most years, while most of the other urban districts saw increases due to the staff personnel through compensation changes. In terms of the fiscal plan, which gives you the 6-year picture for the Bethesda Urban Partnership, it appears to be healthy, but as noted in the staff report, due to the Bethesda parking lot district, we provided a general fund subsidy to support the bonds that were there, and based on the council and executives review of that last year, the Bethesda parking lot district will be providing an additional non-baseline transfer to the Bethesda Urban District to help repay that general fund grant. And so that is partly why you see a higher fund balance in Bethesda than the other ones, and that is estimated to be repaid on the time basis as we expected. And with that, I will turn it over to the committee for any questions related to the Bethesda Urban.
Why don't we just proceed through all the urban districts?
You want to just do them all? Okay.
We can find out what questions there are.
Very well. All right, for Silver Spring, I would say this is a same level service budget. The recommendations are mostly related to compensation adjustments, both for fiscal 22 and fiscal 23. Per the negotiated agreements, it's only a $1,500 increase from the fiscal 22 approved budget. And as well, for the fiscal plan for Silver Spring Urban District, it's showing a deficit in terms of a end-of-the-year fund balance for fiscal 22. And so the fiscal 23 recommendation includes a non-baseline transfer in order to achieve the level of fund balance that this district needs. Council staff does note for that particular one, either there should be a fiscal note or a new line. Since it's a non-baseline transfer, the executive's recommended budget included as a baseline transfer. I should just note that the baseline transfer are for services that the urban district provides naturally through the county government's budget, and so it's support for HR and other services that the district would need whether or not the county existed. And so the baseline transfer is different than the non-baseline transfer, which is additional general fund money for its services there. And so council staff just wants to be able to reconcile that correctly for future fiscal years as we look at the non-baseline transfer to support the support the urban district's fiscal balance. Other than that, the council staff recommends approval of the executive's recommendation for Silver Spring. And then I'll move on to Wheaton. Before I forget, I just want to note the committee received a memo from Ms. Navarro requesting a $30,000 increase to this budget or reconciliation item to support. Let me pull it up. Just make sure I have the right one. Yes, the Arts District. Thank you. And so since that came out after the packet, I wanted to note that before I forget. And in addition, the executive is recommending additional funding for Wheaton this year. Some of the additional funding is for 2 FTEs. One is for a program manager and 2 are for seasonal staff. On Circle 16, the executive staff have provided more details about what these 3 positions will be doing, but they'll be assisting and helping to operate the public spaces there in Wheaton now that we have a completed open space and the government office building has been completed. So there's activities that are occurring there, and that's what these 2 FTEs will support. In addition, the executive has recommended funding for the Facility Fee Assistance Program. This is a subsidy program that the Office of Community Use of Public Facilities runs, and it helps provide financial assistance for programs, public programs that help benefit vulnerable or at-risk youth or individuals and families with limited income. And so the recommendation is to provide that to the urban district so they can help offset any requests that are through that program. And again, I'll just note this is Navarro's request for $30,000 for the Arts District. With that, council staff also recommends approval of, or concurs with the executive's recommendation for Wheaton. And that is it. Thank you.
First of all, I definitely like the $30,000 additional for programming and support so that that amazing public space can have the resources that it needs. So let's assume my colleagues are enthusiastic about that. Welcome to our regional directors. We don't really have time to do individualized presentations. Luisa, it's great to see you before the committee. I think it might be your first time here in person. The rest of you guys, we we see you all the time, but perhaps in different roles. First time as a regional director.
Roles, yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
In person.
Well, hi, Luisa. So let's start with questions and comments. All right, Councilmember Friesen.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you. Appreciate that we're moving forward on the $30,000 for the Wheaton Arts Parade. Really important to make sure that we're building on the investments that we've made in Wheaton and the progress that we've seen. And I just want to thank all of you. I mean, I obviously spend most of my time working closely with the BCC Regional Service Center in the Bethesda Urban District, and I see BUP is well represented by Stephanie back here. And as a Bethesda resident, I very much appreciate all the great work and the great bang for the buck that we get as Bethesda residents, as county residents for their work. But all of the urban districts really have stepped up in significant ways. I mean, we talk about the streeteries and reimagining what public infrastructure means, what placemaking means, how we adapt to a really challenging environment, particularly for those who live in urban environments. You know, I remember having a conversation, and at some point somebody mentioned a backyard. And I said, well, I don't have a backyard. And a lot of people I know who live near me don't have backyards either. And so we need public spaces to be able to go to, particularly during the pandemic. I don't think it's unique in the pandemic, but I think it was obvious during the pandemic that if you're stuck in your home and your home doesn't have outdoor space, we need public spaces to provide that. We need the activation of those public spaces. We need activities. And those activities don't just happen, they happen because people make them happen. And in many ways, you all did, and I just really appreciate that. And we had this idea of you see a street, and we can think of a streetery. We see a parking lot, we can turn it into a place and activate it with food trucks and other things. There are so many things that our urban districts have stepped up to do, and I think that we really need to continue to invest in our urban districts and invest in you. And as we talk about an urbanizing county, making sure that we have vibrant urban spaces for people to really enjoy a high quality of life and a healthy lifestyle is critical. So thanks for all of your work. There's a lot of new old faces in some ways, those who have been in different roles, or some new faces. But all of it, I think, has added new energy, and really our urban districts in particular are where a lot of the energy in the county comes from when it comes to jobs, when it comes to activities, when it comes to arts. And so just looking forward to moving forward from the pandemic, but really building on some of the things that happened with the urban districts during the pandemic, where we threw the old playbook out and we created a new playbook. And there's a lot of parts of that new playbook that's better. It provides greater opportunities for more residents to enjoy more things in places where they actually want them. And so I hope that we can build off of that. I know that we don't have a lot of conversation to do as much of a presentation and a back and forth as perhaps this would warrant, but look forward to the continuing conversations to really build on that. So just wanted to express my appreciation. Thanks.
And the great thing about you all, good morning or good afternoon, is we see you a lot, out in the world doing what you do. And so and we talk to you a lot because you're right there on the ground. So I'm glad there's no controversy here. I'm glad we've increased the money for Wheaton, and good to see you, Louisa. And I'll be looking for the White Oak one, or next time. No, just kidding. I know you're not doing it. Appreciate all the work you're doing. If there are any issues that you wanted to raise today, just email us. I don't, if there's anything pressing. But it's usually a good practice to take yes for an answer. So thank you for everything that you're doing.
Okay. All right, well, there's one issue that I think we should just talk about in a very general way, which is the bid. Gene, can you just, refresh us here what you've written in the packet?
Sure. Let me get to that section. So the council had approved Bill 321 in 2021 after overriding the veto from Mr. Elrich. This created the Silver Spring Business Improvement District. And since then, the bid has created a board as authorized by the bill. As noted in that staff report, which was written by Mr. Drummer, but I borrowed from since he did the work for the legal sessions, the council made several amendments to that bill, to including the board composition as well as limiting the bid's efforts only to marketing and promotions. The thrust of that conversation was to retain the urban districts for the clean and safe team, which has been there for a very long time, and provide those specific services, while the bid would be focused on marketing and promotions. As noted, the current budget in Silver Springs Urban District is about $18,000 for general marketing. But beyond that, anything related to the bid would be a separate conversation based on that bill from the urban districts conversation, which we're having today.
And in the meantime, the state has passed legislation that changes some of the basic rules for the bids and their board membership. And so the bid that the county group has formed will need to be changed to reflect that. So there's actually, I understand they have to resubmit to some extent as well. So there's plenty of work ahead there. But I do want to say I still think we should proceed, and I think the state legislation has addressed issues that were raised. So we don't have to do that here because it's not necessarily a Fed committee issue, but we can put funding on the reconciliation list for the bid to get up and running, provided that it, of course, meets the obligations of the state legislation that has been passed. So that can be a conversation at full council in the appropriate budget category, which is not urban districts here today. But wanted to just make that comment. Yes.
Yeah, just a clarifying question in terms of reconciliation list. I mean, I don't maybe the suggestion, we can flesh it out later, but is the suggestion as a replacement for the urban district funding? Because the bid is a tax rate. I mean, which is obviously not a Fed committee issue. I happen to serve on the tax committee, so it's a budget policy question and a tax policy question, but I'm not necessarily sure that it's a reconciliation list issue unless we're talking about backfilling certain funding from the general fund.
Is we put funding to get the bid up and running, but I don't think we're prepared to act on the tax rate at this time.
Got it. Okay. So you're suggesting that you may have a proposal to move forward funding
to allow the bid to get off the ground.
But that we're not suggesting a tax rate.
Not suggesting a tax rate change because I don't think there's any way to do that successfully at this time in this budget year.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because I wasn't clear.
There are tremendous implications of changing the tax rate, and it's just, that's really challenging at this time. So this would be a way to fund the startup while the executive branch would then have to work out the contract with the bid. So there would be a lot of work involved, but hopefully that would allow us to address concerns that have been raised and get this all ready so that work can start, and then next year the tax rate can be modified. So that would, yeah.
Yeah, I think to our previous conversation, cart before the horse here, the structure, we have to pass, and it's my understanding, a different bill to authorize the bid to form in the form that is compliant with the state law, which I had advocated for at the time based on the letter. This isn't like new information. We knew this was coming. And so I wouldn't want to put any funding for something that was so controversial like this until we knew what passed the law saying what the structure is. So we can, again, it's kind of academic at the Fed table here, but that's just since we're talking about it, I don't think that would be appropriate. I'm glad we're funding the urban district, and I also wouldn't be supportive of changing the tax rate at this time. So we'll have those discussions. But Gene, am I correct that we would need to pass a different bill?
Correct. Based on the way the Office of the County Attorney and our attorneys have looked at it, the bill is both retroactive, but for existing districts, which Silver Spring is the only one in the county, it's increasing the number of board members as well as the composition of that board, and so the legal team believes that the bid would need to reapply in fiscal 23 so that the council had time to act before July 1st, 2023, when the state law goes into effect for those changes.
I appreciate
so that
So,
is
so
the
we could also appropriate, if it reforms and we pass the law on resubmits, we could appropriate money at that time as well, in a supplemental potentially.
Correct. If the county wanted to provide a supplemental, in addition to Mr. Friedson's point, I think as well as your point, Mr. Chawanda, the bid could request a tax rate at any time. The county has passed through tax rates for several organizations.
But it doesn't have to be during budget time.
And that has to be done because of the way the fiscal year works, as well as the way the consolidated tax bill works for properties in the county. So we set those with the levy resolution for all of our tax rates. There's a table that includes Oakmont and a few others that those organizations ask for a tax rate, and we just simply put whatever tax rate they request.
Got it. Okay. Well, more to come on that, but I appreciate the conversation.
Okay. All right. So, want to do a very, a speed presentation here? Ken, start us off. Pete, start us off.
I don't think they were ready to go. I thought they were taking yes for an answer.
Okay. All right. I didn't want to be rude. You came all this way.
Ken's better looking. Thank you. Thank you, members of the committee. Pete Fosselman, Regional Services Director for Bethesda Chevy Chase. Want to recognize your 12 years of service to the county. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it. And also, and also, I'm glad that Councilmember Friesen recognized Stephanie here from BUP today. They do an amazing job. They are our #1 partner in the Bethesda Chevy Chase Regional Services, as well as my right-hand person, TJ Dant, who's behind me. He's our Urban District Manager, and all 3 of our Urban District Managers do an amazing job to keep our communities in line. I brought all kinds of stuff to share with you, but it's going to take up a lot of time.
Yeah.
So I want to hit a couple of quick points here. The Bethesda Regional Services is about 26% of the county's entire population, which is a good chunk. Within that population, it's roughly 11% poverty rate, which is not what people think of that area. They think otherwise. And we've been working with our partners at Nourishing Bethesda, and thank you, Councilmember Friedson, for support for that, as well as our executive who have gone to the food banks that they do on Fridays, every Friday afternoon, which all of you are welcome to attend. It's actually a really nice learning experience, and you get to meet some new people. We've been welcoming a lot of the Afghan refugees. We have English classes at the RSC. We're assisting with job applications, as well as how to get their driver's license, housing opportunities, applications. And then we've also been working on some really interesting development projects, which we're excited about, such as the Women's Farmers Market, which was mentioned a while ago, in partnership with them. And then we're contemplating a brewery district, an arts and brewery district for Bethesda. We've got some great partners on board with that, including Bethesda Green. And so in closing,
And not in the downtown, or is that in the downtown?
Well, we haven't laid out the actual district, so we're going to have our first meeting with some new partners on board.
I would love to see a cool new brewery in downtown Bethesda. We have got Rock Bottom, but it's a little different vibe. It'd be nice to get one of these, sweet breweries that are cropped up around the county, get one in Bethesda.
And another exciting point about that is the first one that we may get who's very interested is minority-owned, and it would be the first one in the county, I believe, so that's important.
There is one already, Black Viking is here. Is that the one?
Yes.
Oh, nice. All right.
Anyway, again, thank you very much for your continued support, and we're here to help you all. And also, these guys have been amazing as new RSC directors, and they've been great to work with. So,
cool. Welcome.
Thank you. Luisa Cardona, Mid-County Regional Service Center Director. It's a pleasure to be here in front of you guys for the first time. Thank you, Pete, even though we all agreed not to bring our presentations, even though we all have them.
Oh!
it's just a picture. I printed this at home.
Boy Scout not being trustworthy. Yeah.
I have receipts, Pete. No, thank you. The Wheaton Urban District has really been working tremendously hard. Thank you to Crystal Reese, who is here with us, and our entire Clean and Safe team, who are doing a tremendous job and actually spend over 60% of their time doing things besides cleaning, which a lot of people don't understand, including ambassadorship, including our events, like the Wheaton Arts Parade, which thank you for that funding. We look forward, though, to activating more of our spaces, because with the pandemic and exploring new things, that's why this new funding was proposed. In order to really promote community and businesses, we know we need to activate fully our spaces, and part of the equity principles of the county executive include the facility fee assistance program, which thank you so much for funding that, because it is going to be so important in order to provide equitable spaces to everyone in our community. But thank you, and I look forward to seeing you all at our events, including the Taste of Wheaton on June 12th.
All right. And how do you deal with all the emails to Luis Cardona?
Oh, we've gone back and forth. I think we know a lot more about each other's jobs than I think we would both care to know.
I have the same thing with the other Andrew Friedson, professor in Colorado.
Oh.
There's an alliance.
You really get to know each other intimately.
Yes.
Well, welcome. We're glad you're here. Jacob.
Top of the morning, top of the afternoon. It's great to be here. Also, like Pete, I had pages and pages of formal statements prepared, but I'll kind of just speak from the heart. It's wonderful to be before you, and it's really been an incredible 7-8 months working with you, coming into this new role with the county. It's been crucial to have my right hand, who also came into a new role with the county, Carson Henry, working in tandem. If any credit is deserved for the reemergence of the Silver Spring Urban District, it's really due to Carson Henry. He's been phenomenal and really kept me above water every day of the week. I just wanted to say thank you for all you're doing, not only with regards to funding this budget, but it's a huge moment for Silver Spring in so many different ways. Pete's going to try and steal my thunder with the Arts and Brewery District, but we're receiving some funding, federal funding, for an Arts and Brewery District already in Silver Spring, and looking to continue to grow that. One or two can go over there as long as we get maybe a farm brewery prop up. Yeah, it's all right. Couple beers on the table, we'll figure it out. But also, really a pivotal moment with the Silver Spring downtown and adjacent communities plan as well. It's your work on it has been inspiring and just trying to keep tabs of everything going on in Silver Spring, working with local businesses, community members, across public safety. You said just say thank you, so it's a long-winded way of saying thank you, and I too look forward to the work together.
Thank you. Absolutely. Ken. Oh, you're right. You're no longer a regional director. Great. I guess our others are otherwise engaged because they don't have urban districts. All right. Okay. Very good. Well, thank you for everything. Look forward to working with you. All right.
Thanks, guys.
We're adjourned.